Sup folks, welcome to the part 20, of What If Deku Run an Orphanage, chapter 119, Baby-faced. Izuku was very nervous about this next child, and it wasn't because she had a dangerous quirk. They all had dangerous quirks, and this one wasn't even uncontrollable. To give more details, this child was named AKA, and her quirk was called Assimilation. Assimilation was a mutant-type quirk that turned AKA's entire body into a kind of metallic clay-like substance. Her body could change shape to a minor degree, not full-on shape-shifting like Sansan. She could also regenerate if her body had enough nutrients, but the main ability of assimilation was its ability to allow AKA to take over another person's body and mind. All she had to do was insert any part of her body into a person's bloodstream, through a cut of some kind. It could be a small piece of herself that she could rip off, or her entire body if the cut was big enough. Then this would allow AKA to take over that person's body and mind, giving her full access to their abilities, and depending on how big of a piece of her and that person, she can even access their quirk factor, and start to mutate it, causing changes in a person's body and quirk. She could take over as many people as she wanted, adding them to a sort of hive mind. It was a very dangerous quirk, but one that was also controllable. Normally, she'd just be under government watch, without them feeling the need to take her away into the DOC program, unless she proved to be dangerous. Which she did, because her mindset was almost as dangerous as her quirk. AKA had lived in a small town near the mountains, that had been utterly destroyed by villains, leaving very survivors, none of which were AKA's parents, leaving the poor girl alone, and devastated. And this had a terrible scar on her mind. This was seen when she was taken to an orphanage, which was unfortunately run by a less than suitable director, who was rather abusive towards the children. Thanks to the villain attack, AKA now had an unyielding hatred towards villains and anyone who acted like a villain. And so, while most people would despise a man who abused children, AKA's hatred was on another level, shown by when she convinced some of the other children to cut the director with a knife, allowing her to use her quirk to take over his body. She then proceeded to torture him for several days, forcing him to harm himself, before giving control of the body back to him temporarily, so he could feel the pain. This torture lasted for a week, before AKA decided it was enough, forced him to gather up evidence of wrongdoing, and made him turn himself in. Naturally, the authorities realized something wasn't quite right, and quickly discovered that AKA was controlling him, and after extracting the piece of her from his body, he immediately told her what AKA had done. Once that was revealed, AKA was deemed too dangerous to be part of normal society at the moment and thus was taken into DOC's care. When confronted about her actions, AKA insisted she was in the right, saying that the only reason she didn't torture him for longer was that she was concerned he would die. So at the very least, she drew a line at that point, although she stated that she didn't particularly care if the man lived or died, rather she didn't want to be labeled as a killer. It was clear the incident had traumatized her quite severely, and it was going to be hard to convince her that perhaps villains didn't need to be tortured, or treated like they weren't human, especially since that mindset wasn't necessarily popular. Izuku sighed as he looked down at one of the other documents he had to sign. It was a related document to accept a shipment of what was called Vegeta formula, Vegeta being short for vegetables. This formula had one purpose: releasing a person from AKA's control. Because normally, trying to release someone from AKA's control would be almost impossible in a fight. The only way to do so, other than this formula, would be to remove or destroy the piece of AKA that was in their body. However, a way around that was by exploiting AKA's main weakness, vegetables. She was deadly allergic to vegetables, to the point where eating them could actually be fatal to her. As such, if a person under AKA's control were to consume a vegetable, it could kill the piece of AKA that was inside them, thus freeing them of AKA's control. This formula was made to streamline the process. Just throw a bomb filled with this formula at someone AKA was controlling, it'll explode into a gas, and once they breathe it in, that person will quickly be freed of AKA's control. Of course, this gas was very dangerous to AKA and would need to be kept away from her main body. The only reason Izuku felt comfortable accepting this gas was because of the potential danger aka possessed by living here. Izuku didn't like looking at children as potential villains, but he couldn't turn a blind eye to the possibility of aka taking control of the other children here, and that would be disastrous. I hope I never have to use this. Izuku shook his head as he signed the paper. Hopefully, everything just works out until I can get them into therapy. Izuku waited outside of the house, with Okako beside him. I'm sure she'll be fine. She hates villains and there are no villains here. Okako reassured him. Not yet. Remember Nice, Izuku pointed out. Okako's eyes widened. Oh god, I forgot about her. Oh, that's gonna I'm sure you'll figure something out. I hope so, Izuku said, as he saw a car drive through the entrance gates, and up to the house. The car stopped, and the back door opened. At long last, I am free, he heard a young feminine voice say. For some reason, the voice sounded like something you'd hear come out of a villain on an old dubbed anime, or like a Power Rangers villain. And then he saw her. Despite being 9 years old, the girl was about as short as Kyaku. Her entire body was metallic silver, looking like a mixture of liquid metal and clay. Her eyes were pure blue, with no pupils or anything, just blue. She wore a mostly yellow and blue dress, with some red stripes thrown in, as well as a hairband with similar colors, wrapped around the top of her head, which was shaped into a weird ponytail thing that drooped down from her head to her back. Yes, excellent, aka said as she exited the car, with a sinister grin on her face. From here, I'll become the most powerful hero in history. Never in their lives did either Izuku or Okako think that they'd hear someone proclaim they wanted to be a hero in a cartoonish villain monologue. This place just gets weird and weirder, Okako thought to herself. Well, I hope we can provide everything you'll need to achieve that goal, Izuku said as he walked over to the small girl, and gave her a friendly smile. Aka looked up at him with an inquisitive glare, putting her finger under her chin as she sized him up. So you are the caretaker of this facility? Yes, you're younger than I expected. Well, no matter. I'm sure you heard about the last caretaker that dared to commit evil acts in front of me. Izuku nodded. Yes, I did, and I'm glad you brought him to justice. I'm not particularly happy about the torture, but after all you've been through, I don't feel the need to hold that against you. So let's put that behind us. Aka kept looking at Izuku for any sign of evil, but after not finding any she moved on. Very good. Well then show me around my new fortress. She and Kiba are either going to get along wonderfully, or horribly. I'm scared of what'll happen if it's the latter, Izuku thought to himself, as he took Aka inside. Well first, let me show you your room, Izuku said, as he opened the door, and showed her room. Aka looked over the room. It had been prepared for her the day before. The bed was made, a computer and TV had been set up, and the room was dusted and cleaned. She jumped onto the bed and looked around a little more. Yes, this place is fine for the time being. Obviously, once I become a hero I'll purchase myself a whole mansion, but for now, this will do. I'm glad you think so, Izuku told her gently. Speaking of becoming a hero, from your files, I've read you've had some trouble training, because your body doesn't exactly gain muscle or grow very much, and you can't exactly test your quirk on people. Aka scowled. True, the price for having an amazing quirk is that it's rather hard to train with. Well, in response to this, I have thought of several ways for you to train, Izuku said, pulling out a piece of paper and showing it to her. For one, you could practice some gymnastics and martial arts. This will help you when you don't have anyone under your control to fight for you. Speaking of which, I've also had the idea of giving you some bladed weapon training, since you have to actually make a cut into your opponent in order to take them over. Aka put on a thoughtful pout, as she considered Izuku's words. Part of me dislikes having to do things myself, but I will do what I must to make sure villains are punished. Good. One of the most important parts of being a hero is to understand what you can and can't do, especially on your own. Izuku warned her. This place is home to children with powerful quirks like yourself. There are even a few who want to be heroes, and they would easily be able to make a cut in an opponent. Wonderful, They sound like good allies. Hey. Once again the girl let out an evil laugh. Together with the power of friendship, we will crush the villains in mind, body, and spirit. Ha ha ha. I've never heard anyone talk about the power of friendship so sinisterly, Izuku thought to himself. Speaking of those kids, I do need you to remind you, that while they are powerful, they are also dangerous, which is why they're here. Don't do anything that may cause them to freak out or panic, or it could end in complete disaster, for you and everyone else. I know that, aka stated confidently as she crossed her arms over her chest and closed her eyes cockily. Trust me, I am very smart. I'm sure nothing bad will happen because of me. I hope so. Also, just to let you know, there is a very tall boy, about 6 feet to be exact. Looks like he's covered in moss. Don't touch him or you may burst into flames. Izuku warned her. AKA's eyes opened quickly, after hearing what Izuku just said. Oh, and there's another girl here who constantly reads the minds of the people around her. She can't stop, so please don't get upset about her. Izuku continued. AKA repeated, her eyes getting wider. One more thing. There is a girl you may see. She has lavender hair, and wears a hoodie. She gets scared very easily, and if she gets too frightened she'll let off a gas that makes you experience a living nightmare that's so awful it's put people in states to where they'll need to have therapy for the rest of their lives. AKA repeated once again, this time much louder as her eyes achieved max wideness. But don't worry, she's gotten a lot better control of it since she first got here. Izuku tried to reassure her before something else came to mind. Sorry, one more thing, I promise. You are going to see monsters around here that look like they're made of darkness. That's normal. They're made via the quirk of another child here. Don't worry, they won't hurt you. Oh, okay. AKA was stunned by all this, so Izuku decided to let her learn everything else at her own pace. Well, that's most of the important information. There's a list of rules on a board on this floor. If you need anything, feel free to ask me, or one of the temporary workers here. They're only going to be here for a short time, but while they're here you're free to ask them to help, within reason of course. A broken bar, I will do that, AKA responded, still a little shocked. Right, well, I'll let you get comfortable here. Your Araka should have your bags up soon, so just wait a little bit, Izuku told her kindly, as he got ready to leave. Remember, if you need anything, or anything's wrong, just call me, and I'll take care of it. Izuku opened the door to leave and found Yonda standing on the other side, with a tray of cookies in her hands. Hello, father. Yonda greeted him cheerily with a big smile on her face, before looking past him at AKA. And hello to you, AKA. My name is Yonda. It's a pleasure to meet you. Why is there a voice in my head? AKA panicked for a moment, before remembering what Izuku had told her. Wait, the caretaker told me about a psychic girl. This must be her. Wait, is she reading my mind right now? Yes, I do apologize for the scare, but this the only way I can speak, Yonda told her as she came into the room. I am also deaf, so any attempts to speak to me in a normal way will unfortunately fail. Oh, well, a broken bar. Greetings. I am AKA, the future bane of all villains. AKA introduced herself after getting her bearings. For now, I'll be staying here until my rise to power. Don't worry, if anyone attempts any villainy here, they will regret what they've done, very much. Ha ha ha. Did she just do an evil laugh in her head? Yonda thought to herself while keeping up her friendly smile. I'm sure. Anyway, I've brought some cookies, free of vegetables or vegetable ingredients of course. Fuka made these. She's another one of the girls that live here. She's a lovely girl but very shy. She wanted to make you these to welcome you here, but she didn't have the courage to come and give you them herself, so I'm here instead. The moment Yonda said vegetable free, she sped over to her and greedily looked over the tray. Don't mind if I do. She then grabbed the whole tray and shoved it in her mouth, which extended to fit the massive object, and once it was halfway in, she let all the cookies fall into her mouth, before spitting the tray back out. Those were delicious. Did you even have time to taste those? Yonda asked her skeptically. I'm tasting them right now, AKA told her. Okay then. I'm just not going to try and understand how your body works, Yonda told her. Anyway, let's talk for a while. I'd love to get to know you better. Yonda, You're not planning anything, are you? Izuku asked her, giving her a questioning look. Of course not, father. I just want to get to know our new friend and welcome her to our wonderful home, Yonda said innocently, in a very cheeky tone. Well, I don't really have any reason to suspect you'd do something wrong here. Please don't prove me wrong, Izuku told her, as he started to leave. Well, I'll let you two get acquainted. Please behave, both of you. Yes, father, Yonda said, waving Izuku goodbye as he exited the room before she turned her head to AKA. Now then, let's have a talk. Author's note: sorry if the chapter is short, but this was just to introduce AKA into the story. Next chapter will be devoted to her character interactions. Yeah, if you haven't guessed, AKA is based on Baby from Dragon Ball GT. Chapter 120, short. Alright Fuku, just gotta make that pudding and then you can go back to your room, Fuko told herself as she snuck into the kitchen late at night. Alright, first let's get a bowl. She went over to a cabinet and opened it up, only to see AKA, hiding inside, wearing a gas mask. Found you at last, AKA said. Fuko jumped back and screamed, and gas exploded out of her. Ha 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 ha. How fortunate I choose to wear this mask. Truly I am a genius, AKA cackled, as she stepped out of the cabinet. Who are you? What do you want with me? Please don't kill me. Fuko quickly realized she'd made a mistake. She jumped away at an angle that made her go further into the kitchen, and away from the exit, and now AKA was blocking her path. I am AKA, the new resident of this house, AKA announced, walking closer to Fuku, who backed away as she advanced. You were the one who made me those cookies, weren't you, Fukinoko? Did you think I would allow you to escape after that? Did you really think I wouldn't find you? Oh no, she must have hated the cookies and come to take out her rage on me. Fuko trembled, as she backed further and further away from AKA, but the other girl just kept coming forward. Please, spare me, Fuku begged, tears glimmering in her eyes, as she kept moving back. However, she stopped once she reached the wall. There was nowhere to go. I spare no one. Ha 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 ha. AKA once again evilly cackled, as she raised her arms and lunged at Fuku. Huh? Fuku suddenly stopped screaming, when AKA threw her hands around her and gave her a hug and a pat on the back. Those cookies were delicious. Thank you, AKA told her, before separating from her and turning around. Now with that done, I am going to go to sleep, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop me. Good night. And with that, she just left. Fuku just stood there for a while, unsure of what just happened, before eventually coming to a conclusion. I think I'll make that pudding tomorrow night, Fuko told herself. AKA was chilling out in her room, which was now properly decorated with things. There were various posters of superheroes from American comic books, covering almost every inch of the walls, and those comic books themselves were all over the floor, stacked atop each other. The girl herself was laying down on her bed, reading one of her comic books, when suddenly there was a knock on her door. Ugh, who dares disturb me? AKA groaned, putting down her comic, and going over to the door. She opened it, and on the other side was Fu. Before Fu could say anything, AKA started yelling. You, state your name and business here. Why have you disturbed my relaxation time? Ah, I see we have another color personality here, Fu sighed, before introducing himself. My name is Fu, and this Kyozai. Kyozai popped a head out of Fu's shirt, causing AKA to look on in shock. He lives inside me. Don't worry about it, Fu said as Kyozai went back into his body. They must have a quirk similar to my own. Interesting, AKA said, putting her hand on her chin. Anyway, so we heard you want to be a hero, Fu stated. Well, you heard correctly, AKA confirmed, giving him a sinister smile. I plan on becoming a powerful hero, and tormenting all evildoers that would do evil. All villains will fear the name AKA. Ha 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 ha. Oh, Kiba's gonna love her. Fu thought as he rolled his eyes. Well, me and the other future heroes wanted to see what you're made of, so we gathered up in the training room. You coming? Nah, don't feel like it, AKA said, seemingly dismissing him. only to burst out laughing a few seconds later, as if, of course, I'll come. I need to see who my allies in villain crushing will be. Well then follow me, Fu told her, before turning around and walking away. Just so you know, I think you guys will get along just fine. Fu lead her outside, just outside of Kai's room, where Kai, Kiba, Ken, Nara, Sansen, Netsu, and Yami were waiting. Hello, new friend, Kai greeted her once she came into view, his voice bellowing throughout the forest. Why is he so big? Aka thought to herself when she saw him. Hey there, welcome to the Future Heroes Club, Netsu said, running over to greet her. I'm Netsu. Aka opened her mouth, but Fu spoke before she could say anything. Yes, he knows he is on fire. That's normal, Fu told her. Okay then, I am Aka, future bane of all villains. Aka announced, one day I will become a hero, and bring pain and suffering to all criminals. Yeah, I can definitely tell your heroic intentions from your evil laugh, Ken sarcastically remarked as he raised an eyebrow at Aka's statement. Hey, my laugh is not evil, Aka gasped, offended by Ken's observation. It kinda is, Ken retorted. It's the most generic evil laugh I've heard come out of a real person. No, it's not, Aka argued back, glaring at Ken while crossing her arms. A laugh by itself can't be evil. A laugh can only be evil if you're laughing at something bad. Like if you laugh at a funeral, that's an evil laugh. I mean, she's not wrong. Fu shrugged. It's pretty evil to laugh at a funeral. I want people to laugh at my funeral, Netsu replied, causing everyone to look at him in confusion. Why on earth would you want that? Aka asked with the most bemused look on her face. Well, otherwise it'd just be a bunch of sad people in the room, Netsu pointed out casually. I don't want my funeral to be a bunch of sad people in the room. But that's just what a funeral is, Fu tried to explain to him. I don't want my funeral to be a bunch of sad people in a room, Kai said, pouting with all three of his heads. Yeah, me neither. I want my funeral to be a party, Netsu decided. Who would be in the mood to party after you die? Kiba asked him. If you have a party then people will just try to force themselves to have fun, and bottle up their emotions until they explode. Boom. Sansen made herself explode into a puddle, to illustrate Kiba's point. Wait, guys, we got off topic, Fu told them. Remember we're supposed to test how strong Aka is, not talk about whether or not funerals are supposed to be fun. Well said, Fu. Let's get to what we came here for, Kiba said, before cracking her fingers and then her neck. So then new girl, what's your quirk? My quirk is called assimilation. I can rip off pieces of myself, and put them inside cuts in people's bodies, and then take them over, Aka explained proudly. Wait, doesn't that mean you can't do anything until you cut your opponent? Ken pointed out, immediately seeing a problem here. Well, why yes, Aka admitted, blushing a bit. But once that happens, the villains will be completely helpless. But until that happens, you're completely helpless, Ken remarked harshly before Nara elbowed him. Ow. What? I'm being honest, what he meant to say was, does your quirk have an ability to help you actually cut villains? Nara asked her. Or at least help you survive against them? Well, a broken bar I can regenerate a broken bar. My body is really squishy and hard to injure a broken bar and I don't feel pain as much, Aka stated sheepishly. So, nothing that can actually help you make a cut in someone? Kiba asked her, giving her a skeptical look. Aka began looking downward, avoiding everyone's gazes and sweating nervously. I see. Fu looked at her and thought for a while. She reminds me of me back before I bonded with Kyozai. Fu noted. Well, I guess her quirk could be way more useful than mine, in the right circumstance. Alright guys, looks like we're going to have to do things a bit differently, Fu told them. Since her quirk is not as self-sufficient as most of ours, she might work better in a team fight. So here's what we're gonna do. Kiba and Aka will fight against Ken and Nara. Huh? Why do I have to be teamed up with him? Ken and Nara said at the same time, before glaring at each other. Can you two stop pretending to hate each other for a few minutes and just do it? Fu sighed. It looks like we'll be working together. I am the great and mighty Kiba. My strength will pull us through, Kiba told Aka confidently. Well, My quirk will ensure our victory and their doom, aka retorted. Make sure to use my abilities well. Ha 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 ha. Alright, all of you will be given some time to prepare and strategize, Fu told them. Then we'll meet in the forest and start fighting. Got it? Good. Let's get started. After about 10 minutes, everyone had gathered in a large opening in the forest. Kiba and aka stood on one side, and Ken and Nara stood on the other side, with all the other kids sitting a good distance away from them, and Kai looking down on them all. Alright, everyone ready? Fu asked them. 1 second, Nara said, before looking at Ken. Better not mess this up, doofus. That's what I should be saying, Ken replied, as they both selected a form on their Omnitrix. They both slammed down on their devices, and in a flash of green and pink, the two had transformed. Ken had turned into Stinkfly and Nara had turned into Bloxx. Oh, this might be a problem, aka realized. I don't suppose you can take over that Lego ape, can you? Kiba whispered to her. Unless it has a bloodstream. No, aka told her. So then we just need to focus on Ken, Kiba told her. Try to keep Nara distracted. Alright, let's get this over with, Fu announced, as he stepped back. 3.2.1 Go. Immediately Ken tried to take to the sky while shooting goo at Kiba to try and keep her away. Kiba had, at the same time, rushed towards Ken, and had to roll to the side to avoid the goo, and she continued running towards Ken while narrowly dodging the goo. Ken hadn't made it very far into the air by the time Kiba reached him, and Kiba jumped up and grabbed one of his legs. Hey, let go. Ken tried to shake her off, but Kiba kept a firm grip on his leg and threw a piece of aka onto one of his wings, which stuck like glue. Before Kiba could do anything else, Nara turned her arm into a cannon, and shot a part of her Lego-like body at Kiba, knocking the vampiric girl off her brother. Kiba rolled across the ground, before pushing herself upright. Meanwhile, Ken tried to shake off the piece of aka that had been thrown on him, but it held on tight. It's not coming off. Then get in the air and don't get cut, moron, Nara ordered. Don't boss me around, Ken argued, while also doing exactly what she said, and getting higher up in the air. Alright Kiba, try cutting me now, Kiba then proceeded to start taking chunks out of the ground and throwing them at Ken as fast as she could. Ken of course tried flying around to avoid the projectiles, but that was easier said than done. He had to stay in bounds, meaning his movement options were limited, and Kiba had lots of ground to throw at him. A little help here? Ugh, can't you do anything on your own? Nara asked him sarcastically, before aiming her arm cannon at Kiba to shoot at her again, only for aka to stand in her way. Not so fast. Before you fight her you must first face me. As aka was giving her speech, Nara extended one of her arms and grabbed her. Nara's massive hand encompassed most of her tiny body. Nara's fist then expanded around aka, before transforming into a Lego brick prison box, trapping the silver girl for the time being. Curses, aka screamed, although it could barely be heard from inside the box. Once Nara disconnected herself from the box, and grew back her hand, she grabbed the box and used it to launch herself over it, right at Kiba. Nara extended her fist down at Kiba, and the vampire girl was forced to jump back to dodge it and halt her assault. Alright, Ken, gunk her up, so I can trap her, Nara shouted at her brother. However, the response she got was less than pleasing. Ugh, Ken? Nara looked up at Ken, who was holding his head in pain. One of the chunks of ground that Kiba had thrown at him successfully made a small cut on his head, and the chunk of aka crawled down towards it and was now crawling into the wound. Oh, this feels so wrong. It didn't take long for Ken to start falling to the ground, crashing into the dirt, before a flash of red overtook him, and Ken had been turned back to normal. Ha 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 ha, aka laughed from inside her box. Your demise is at hand, now witness my power. Ken groaned in pain, while his body suddenly started changing. His hair turned a silverish white, and his eyes turned bright blue. All of a sudden, Ken stopped groaning, and his face morphed into a twisted grin and looked up at Nara with a sinister glare. Hello, sister. Yeah, nope. Nara launched her arm at Ken, grabbing him, and morphing her hand into a binding prison that would keep him from moving his arms, and touching the Omnitrix. Please don't say anything like that with my brother's mouth. In that case, I'll let my fist do the talking, aka/Ken said, as suddenly, they were engulfed in green, and then were transformed into 4 arms, who immediately burst out of the bind that Nara had put them in, all 4 of them. Ha. She made him change without using the Omnitrix? Nara thought to herself. Come to think of it, she must have made him change back to normal too. Can she alter the way a quirk works when she takes over someone? I must admit this is a wonderful body, with such an interesting quirk, aka/Ken said as they inspected their body. So many powers. I wonder if I'll be able to use all of them in this fight. Let's find out, aka/Ken started approaching Nara, causing her to start backing up. However, Kiba suddenly dashed behind her, cutting her off. Now, don't run away. This is where things get interesting. Kiba smirked at Nara viciously, knowing she'd already won this fight. Of course, with the odds stacked against her, Nara knew that just as well, and did the only logical thing she could do in this case. I give up, Nara said, raising her arms as proof of her surrender. Not much point in fighting a 3 versus 1 battle. What? Kiba and aka/Ken shouted in shock and slight outrage. And that's it. Kiba and aka win. Fu quickly stepped in. Congratulations. Now aka please get out of Ken's body. All you. But I didn't even get to do anything with it. aka/Ken whined. You wanna fight with it? That's something. Not get out. Fu told her again, very sternly. HMPH. Fine. aka/Ken pouted, and in a flash of red Ken's body returned to its normal form. Then after a few moments, Ken's hair and eye color returned to normal, as the piece of aka that had been in him crawled out of the cut on his forehead. Ken's eyes rolled up, and he proceeded to fall on his back. Oh you. Nara went over to her brother, while Kiba went over to AKA's prison box to break her out of it. You okay, doofus? Nara asked, slightly concerned about his well-being. Never again, Ken groaned as he regained full control of his body, with the only noticeable side effect being a killer headache. I think I hate Ghost Freak even more now, if that's what it feels like to get possessed. Were you even awake while she was in control of you? Nara asked him, as she offered him a hand, helping him lift himself off the ground. I just felt something going through my body, and then everything went black. Then I woke up with this headache. Ugh. Ken groaned, clutching his poor head. Feel like I got hit by a truck. Meanwhile, Fu used one of Kyozai's tendrils to pick up the piece of aka that had been inside Ken and bring it to his hand. What an interesting quirk. All of them were now gathered. Nara had returned to normal, and aka had been freed. That was short, Yami said, pointing out the obvious. Yes, it was rather disappointing. I was hoping you'd at least try to fight after Ken was possessed, Kiba said, frowning at the older girl, who gave her a deadpan look. Kiba, I'm not sure I could beat you in a one-on-one fight, let alone you and my idiot brother. Nara told her, hey, it's not my fault I got possessed. Do you know how hard it is to get through a fight without getting cut? Ken argued, glaring at his sister. If I could have just used Heat Blast, there's no way I could have gotten taken over. We already told you why you couldn't do that, Fu reminded him. Before the fight had started, Fu had told Ken not to use Heat Blast, as the part of the forest they were in didn't have any lakes around, so the Goliaths couldn't put out any potential forest fires Ken may start in that form. Ken was opposed to this, but Fu was insistent that it's how things had to be unless he wanted to delay the fight for hours so that way they could find another place for them to fight. This was a lie, however, and in truth, Fu realized that both Ken and Nara had ways to make themselves immune to AKA's quirk, and needed an excuse to keep at least one of them from doing that. He did want to see AKA's quirk in action after all. Well, what did everyone think of AKA's quirk? Fu asked. It's pretty cool. All you have to do is make a tiny cut in the enemy and the fight's over, Netsu gushed. Yeah, it'll make fighting villains super duper easy, Kai added, his massive head looking down at AKA with a big smile. I must admit, while her quirk may not make her all too useful on her own, her usefulness as an ally is impressive. Kiba praised her. It's powerful, Yami simply stated. Yeah, I thought that if Ken could stay high in the air, we could avoid letting her use it, but trying not to get cut in a battle with someone around your level of power sounds like a nightmare. Nara sighed, shaking her head. "I only realized how powerful your quirk was when I started thinking about how to fight against it. Should have given you more credit." Meanwhile, aka had a smile on her face that was so big that it would have hurt if her body wasn't so stretchable, and she would have blushed if her body was capable of it. "Well, of course my quirk is amazing, and with the help of all of you, we will crush our enemies beneath our heel and make them do our bidding." Ahaha. "I like the sound of that," Kiba added, patting her on the back. "Come, everyone, let's celebrate the new addition to the heroic part of this household, with a wondrous feast." Alright, here was the aka Showcase chapter, Chapter 121, The Coming of the Guards. "You seem like you're in a good mood today, Izuku," Okako pointed out, as the two of them walked through the house's halls, down to the first floor. "Am I? Well, I guess that makes sense," Izuku admitted, with a big smile on his face. Sori was discharged from the hospital, and Sai got all of her things together. Both of them are coming in today, so I finally have some security besides the Grim and you guys. No offense to you guys, of course, none taken. After seeing what Sori did to the Grim, it puts into perspective how much progress we still have to make to get anywhere near that level." Okako looked down, and suddenly her smile became a bit strained. Izuku's own smile dipped, as he knew exactly what she was feeling, the feeling of inadequacy. He smiled at her. "Well, you're going to be far stronger than her one day, so don't worry, you'll get there." That did make Okako feel better for a moment, and she smiled back at him before she recalled something. "Then you're going to become the #1 hero, because you'll be able to do those things faster and better than everyone else." Okako couldn't help but remember Yonda's words when she heard Izuku say that. The way he said she'd get stronger than Sori, it was more like a foregone conclusion. She had one for all, for she was. It wasn't really a question if she could get stronger than her, because no matter how much Sori worked, or trained, she'd never reach the output of one for all, and she couldn't help but feel a bit bad. But she quickly shook her head, ridding herself of those thoughts. Right now was not the time to be thinking about that. She didn't want to ruin Izuku's mood after all. "Right, thanks." Okako smiled back at him. "Alright, hopefully when they get here, things will calm down in terms of unwanted violence," Izuku said. "What a broken bar, what on earth happened?" Izuku shouted in shock, as he stared at the scene in front of him. Izuku was on the path that headed towards the facility, and in front of him was just a burnt battleground, covered in craters and fire. And in the middle of it all, was Sori standing over Sai with a foot on her throat. The two of them were covered in cuts, burns, and bruises, their clothes torn and dirtied. "Oh hey, boss." Sori finally noticed Izuku's presence and gave him a big grin. "Sori here, reporting for duty." "Is that seriously the first thing you're going to say to him after all this?" Sai groaned as she attempted to push Sori off of her. "And would you please remove your foot from my throat?" Izuku face-palmed, as Sori moved off of Sai, and Sai got off the ground and dusted off her suit. "Please, just a broken bar, what happened?" "Oh, funny story." Sori started, getting ready to explain everything. "You see, a little less than an hour ago, Sai was walking down the main path towards the facility, with her bag full of her belongings in hand. She didn't have much. The HPSC made sure of that. But at least that meant she didn't have to deal with moving a bunch of bags around. As she was walking down the dirt road, she stopped, and her eyes narrowed. "Hey, something's approaching me." Sai then opened a gate behind her, and a blunt sword flew out of it, just in time as Sori had lunged at her from behind, and was about to grab her, but the sword hit her in the chin and caused her to go fly back. "Ow, shit," Sori said as she rolled backward, landing on her toe. "Damn, that hurt." Sai didn't give her time to recover, and Sori became surrounded by portals, from every angle, with the tips of swords jutting out of them threateningly. "Oh wow, that's a pretty neat quirk you got there," Sori said, looking around at the swords. "Who are you, and what is your business with me?" Sai asked her in a harsh and strict tone, delivering an intense glare towards the cat girl. "Well, you see, I'm this place's guard, so it's kinda my job to stop suspicious people from just walking up the house," Sori explained casually, not at all fazed by the weapons surrounding her. "Wait, you're the other guard Midoriya hired?" Sai realized as she recalled Izuku talking about Sori during their meeting. "Your name is Sori if I recall." "Oh, so you're my partner." "Sword girl," Sori said, realizing her mistake. "Would you look at that? Damn, I need to stop instantly attacking things in this place. Always end up doing something I shouldn't. You should probably stop instantly attacking people in general," Sai told her, deactivating her quirk. "Hey, I didn't say we were done fighting." Sori frowned, getting into a lunging stance. Sai just gave her a bewildered look. "Yeah, broken bar what? I wanna know just how capable my partner is," Sori explained with a savage grin on her face, her tail moving side to side in anticipation. "Also, I've been stuck in the hospital for like a month, and now I finally get the chance to fight someone strong? No way in hell am I letting a chance like this go. Now get ready." Sai took a quick look at Sori and knew she wasn't gonna back down. "Fine, but you're taking responsibility for this. Here we go." Sori lunged at Sai, moving at speeds her opponent had no hope of reacting to. Fortunately, she didn't have to. Kaboom! Suddenly a massive explosion erupted from the ground, hitting both of them and knocking them both back. Sai knew she couldn't keep up with Sori's speed, and at the distance the two were at, she'd need to do something drastic, otherwise, she'd lose instantly. So she created a portal underground and shot an explosive sword out of it. Sori was launched back and sent rolling across the dirt. Meanwhile, Sai was also sent flying back, but since she was prepared for the explosion, she was able to flip back and land on all fours. The former hero didn't give Sori any time to rest and created more portals in front of her. Sori jumped backward, and as the sword shot out of her, she curled into a ball midair, dodging the first set of swords before falling back and landing on her feet. Before dashing forward, Sai shot out more swords at her, but Sai jumped over them, leaping into the air before she started hurtling down at Sai. But Sai opened up portals behind and in front of Sori as she was falling, and shot out lots of swords at her from both sides. In response, when the swords got close, Sori spun around and kicked away most of the swords coming at her, and grabbed two of the others. But that was only a distraction. The swords coming directly at her weren't the threat. It was the swords around her that were the threat, because those swords hit each other, and then kaboom, they detonated, creating a massive explosion that engulfed Sori completely. Sori was spat out of the black cloud that was created from the explosion, hitting the ground close to Sai, before rolling across it behind her. She quickly used her claws to dig into the dirt, to regain her footing and stop herself from moving much further. However, the moment she stopped, Sai surrounded her with portals, with blades aimed at her from all angles. "Ready to give up?" Sai asked her sternly. Sori stood up and cracked her neck before giving her a huge grin. "Not on your life. I'm just getting warmed up." "Very well." Sai acknowledged her resolve. "Be ready." And then the swords closed in on Sori, and after that things got out of hand. Sai sighed, shaking her head in shame. "What are you talking about? That was awesome," Sori argued enthusiastically. "I apologize for the mess, sir." Sai gave Izuku a bow. "I shouldn't have allowed things to progress this far." "It's fine." Izuku shook his head and sighed, as he tried to look on the bright side. "At least now you know each other's capabilities. That's a plus, I guess." "That's it, boss. Just keep looking up," Sori said, walking up to Izuku and patting him on the back. "Now let's get going. I wanna grab some grub." Sai was about to admonish her for her lack of grace or tact, but she was cut off when her stomach started growling. Grrr. The former hero's face instantly went red, and she turned to Izuku with her head held low. "I would a broken bar also appreciate it if we could get something to eat, please." After a short trip to the facility, they finally reached the front gate of the house. "All right, I already have some food ready for the two of you," Izuku told them, as he opened the gate using his phone. "We can just go inside." And before Izuku could finish his sentence, two things happened. First was that Sori jumped backward, third was that Sai grabbed Izuku and pushed him behind her, and third was that Kiba crashed into the ground where Sori had been standing. "Nice dry weight, Lady Kiba," Sori gasped when she realized who had been attacking her, and her eyes sparkled with amazement. "Indeed, it is I, Kiba," Kiba announced, holding her head up high and putting her hands on her hips. "The great and powerful Queen of Eternal Darkness. And you are one of my minions, correct?" "Of course, Lady Kiba. I've come to serve you and the Midoriya clan as well as I can," Sori shouted enthusiastically. By beating the crap out of any idiots who'd wanna punch ya. Kiba nodded. Good, good. However, I can't simply ignore that you broke onto the grounds of my fortress, killed several of my monsters, destroyed my property, and scared my siblings and caretaker. Sori winced and rubbed the back of her head. Yeah, not my brightest moment. And since you're one of my subjects, it falls to me to punish you for your misbehavior. Kiba punched her palm and stared down Sori with a vicious grin on her face. Now prepare yourself for a queen's punishment. However, before the fight could start, Kiba turned to Izuku. I apologize for the scare, caretaker. I hope you don't mind me sparring with our new guard. I don't, but next time, don't come crashing from the sky, Izuku told her, before looking at Sori sternly. And Sori, no using your claws. I don't want my daughter bleeding all over the lawn. Got it, sir? Sori said, giving him a thumbs up. Alright, you two have fun, Izuku told them. And that's when the fight really started. Kiba did a lightning-fast jump kick, launching herself at Sori's face, only for the feline woman to duck backward, and as Kiba sailed over her, Sori grabbed the back of her dress. She quickly stood up and started spinning around, before tossing Kiba into the forest and leaping after her. Is this truly a wise decision? Sai asked, sounding a bit concerned. Honestly, Sori's fight with you was proof enough that she can hold back in a fight. After all, to have a few injuries as you do despite having no enhanced durability has to say something, Izuku said. TCH. Sai looked away in embarrassment. Alright, I'll send one of the UA students to go watch over them. For now, let's go get you something to eat, Izuku told her. And then Sai perked up. At once, sir. Author's notes. Sorry for another short chapter. Just wanted to reintroduce the guards. Also sorry I didn't really show the two fights here, but the next chapter is gonna be more fight heavy, and have some more interesting fights. Chapter 122, Taking Up the Sword. Saibura, the former pro hero turned guard, was currently scarfing down a stupid amount of food on a table in the cafeteria. Right now she was snacking on a rack of ribs, but she also had a beef bowl next to that, some meat skewers next to that, a bowl of rice, and a cooked chicken, as well as a few stacks of plates surrounding her. Dude, where does it all go? Kaminari asked Sato, the two of them being a table away, looking at Sai in shock and awe. I have no idea. Apparently, blonde girls have the ability to eat forever, Sato said as he looked over to Mei, sitting at the same table, eating a similar amount of food together with Yami. I'll have to keep that in mind, Kaminari said, making a mental note of that. While the two were chatting, Momo and Ida came into the cafeteria and walked up to Sai. Please forgive us for interrupting your meal, but we'd like to speak with you about something, Ida told her as they approached. MGRRRRR, Sai sighed, her annoyance clear to all. Even though she had a mouthful of pork, she knew that the 1A students would speak to her sooner or later, most likely sooner given they were leaving the day after tomorrow. But did it have to be while she was eating? After swallowing her food, and reining herself in, Sai turned toward the pair and gave them the most neutral expression she could muster. What is it? Well, we were wondering, since you were a pro hero, if you could give us any personal advice or something of that level? Momo asked her polity. Yeah, that was about what Sai anticipated. It was either this or them asking about why she retired, so she's thankful it was the former rather than the latter. I suppose that's a fair thing to ask, Sai responded. Very well, tell everyone to gather in the training room in an hour, once I'm done eating. Thank you, Ms. Bura. My class will do everything we can to learn from your wisdom, Ida assured her, giving her repeated respectful bows. And I'll everything I can to teach you, even with such limited time, Sai told him, before turning her attention back to her meal. Now if you excuse me, I would like to finish eating. The two didn't even get to respond before Sai started digging in. Why do I have a bad feeling about this? Kaminari asked. After some time, all of 1A gathered in the training room, with Sai standing in front of them, her arms crossed behind her back. Can anyone tell me, what's the most important part of being a hero? Sai asked them. Defeating villains, Todoroki answered. Minimizing casualties, Okako answered. Not dying, Mineta answered. Correct, all of you, Sai told them. In truth, there is no one answer to that question. In my mind, A hero's first priority should be saving and protecting the innocent, at any cost, even their own lives. However, I can't act like all heroes are willing to do that. Some heroes simply aren't willing to pay that price. Others are only heroes for fame and glory, and while I have an issue calling those people heroes, there is little I can do about it. So I must acknowledge those goals as well. But something that should be highly prioritized no matter what your goal is, something that should be a high priority for all of you, is staying alive, which is what I'm going to try and teach you. I will be fighting you each, one by one, and will tell each one of you what your most fatal flaw is. Any questions? You're not gonna stab us, right? Mineta asked nervously, his face going white at the thought of facing Sai's many blades. That, and so much worse, Sai said ominously, but as they say, no pain, no gain, and I think you'll find being stabbed much preferred to being killed. And if not, I would highly suggest you change careers. Now, any other questions? Almost everyone raised their hands. Sai sighed. Hey, I can already tell I'm going to spend my whole day doing this. Sai and Aoyama stood on opposite sides of the training room, with the rest of 1A on the side, watching them. Alright, you can begin, Sai told him, giving Aoyama permission to attack. Aoyama said, before shooting his naval laser at Sai, only for Sai to drop a sword that looked to be made of some kind of glass or crystal, in front of her, causing the laser to deflect into the wall. "Fork, I am going to die," said in French. Aoyama responded, his eyes widened in fear, then portals opened up around Aoyama, surrounding him. Aoyama looked around, and froze in fear, as he saw the swords begin to emerge. Kaboom! The swords exploded on impact, engulfing Aoyama in a massive blast. "Is he gonna be okay?" Mina whispered over to Momo, both of them looking nervously at the smoke cloud that hid Aoyama. "I'm sure she wouldn't do anything to harm us unnecessarily," Momo reassured her, although she didn't sound too sure herself. Eventually, the smoke cleared, revealing Aoyama, on the ground, covered in burns and soot. "And unfortunately I still live," said in French. "Where to begin?" Sai asked herself as she shook her head in disappointment. "A crucial lesson you all must learn is to control your fear. Fear is the #1 cause of death for new heroes and sidekicks." After witnessing this match, can anyone tell me why that is? Sue raised her hand. "Because it shows the enemy their opponent can't beat them, and causes you to freeze?" "That's correct. Fear, more than anything else, will be your biggest hurdle to overcome," Sai told them. "And what if you're not afraid of the villains?" Shito asked. "Then you're an idiot," Sai answered harshly, glaring at Shito. "Fear is absolutely necessary for a hero, because without it, you become overconfident, and overconfidence is the #2 cause of death for new heroes and sidekicks." Quirks are varied, and dangerous. You could go on to try and arrest a group of teenagers mugging an old lady, and then suddenly one of them shoots lasers out of their eyes, and because you were so confident they wouldn't be a threat, you can't dodge it in time and lose your head. Fear is something you must manage, keep it at a healthy level, to where you have a healthy level of caution, without ever allowing it to overwhelm you. This is, of course, easier said than done, and most comes with experience rather than being taught. Still, sparring matches are a good way to help train your fear management skills, and increase your reaction time. Sai looked back at Aoyama, who was pulling himself onto the ground. "Your second biggest issue was your lack of mobility. I could tell by your stance, that your plan was to just fire at me without moving, like a turret. This is a bad strategy against me, especially considering I can attack you from literally anywhere, but in general, that's not a good tactic. There are situations in which not moving while fortifying your position is the best or only way, but most of the time, you at the very least have to be ready to move. I left several openings for you to escape there, but even if you hadn't frozen in fear, you wouldn't have been able to escape the attack in time because you weren't ready to dodge. Just because your quirk doesn't assist with mobility, doesn't mean you shouldn't learn how to dodge." At this point, Aoyama's face was red with embarrassment. I understand. I will strive to improve, Madame Burra." "I hope so, because if you fight villains in your current state, you are going to die," Sai told him bluntly, before looking to the rest of the class. "Let's move on. It was Mina's turn, and now she was staring down Sai with a grin full of false confidence. "You may begin," Sai told her. Instantly, Mina started sliding towards Sai in her acid. Sai made a wall of portals in front of her and shot out a lot of blunt swords at Mina. "I don't think so." Mina let out a wave of acid in front of her and dissolved the swords before they could hit her, allowing her to get through. Surprisingly, Sai didn't send any more swords, allowing Mina to get close. "I've gotcha," Mina shouted as she got ready to punch Sai in the face. However, when she threw her punch, all she hit was the side of another sword that came out of a portal Sai spawned in front of her, an electrified sword. "Gurjilsikadhyoig," Mina cried out in pain as the electricity flowed out from the sword, and into her body. Her hair flew up, her body convulsed and spaced, and burn marks started appearing on her skin. After a few seconds, Sai pulled the sword back into the portal, cutting off the flow of electricity to Mina's body. "Oh you!" Mina fell onto her back, smoke coming off of her well-done body. "Can anyone tell me where she went wrong?" Sai asked, turning her attention to the class. "She announced that she was going to attack you like an idiot," Jiro pointed out. "Hey!" Mina picked herself up and gave Jiro an angry pout. "Correct. If you have to announce your attack like to say your special attack name, then do it while your attack is in the midst of landing, not before you attack, while the villain can still dodge it," Sai explained. Also Sai made a portal above Mina's acid trail and shot out an electrified sword into it, and everyone watched as the trail lit up, lightning sparking off of it. "Always be careful when standing in or making a trail of liquid," Sai said, looking at Mina's horrified face. "Never know when you could get shocked by a villain with an electricity quirk or just an exposed wire." "Keep that in mind," Mina told her, chuckling nervously. Now it was Asui's time. Tsu was in a crouched position, ready to leap at a moment's notice. "All right, begin," Sai told her. Tsu jumped up into the air and was immediately surrounded by a dozen portals. Kaboom! Exploding swords hit her, and Tsu fell out of the cloud, smoking. "Ow, Karo." "Well, that fast," Kaminari noted. "I know you're a frog, but it's dangerous to rely on jumping," Sai told her. "Being in the air leaves you vulnerable to attack. You can't dodge, and you can only move in one direction. Not to mention, if you tend to jump often, your opponents can easily predict what you're going to do and catch you in the air. Plus, if you have a frog quirk, the first thing your enemy will expect you to do is jump." "That's fair, Karo," Tsu croaked. "All right, next student," Sai told them. Now it was time for the class rep, Ida, to take to the battlefield. Ida was in a running stance, ready to go when Sai gave the order. "All right, I'll run as fast as I can. Before she can overwhelm me, I'll kick her," Ida thought to himself, as he got ready to fight. "Go," Sai ordered. Ida then proceeded to run 2 feet in front of him. Before his foot fell through a portal Sai opened, causing him to trip and fall on his face. Sai then opened a bunch of portals above Ida and shot exploding swords out of them. Kaboom! "Was that a broken bar strictly necessary?" Momo asked, wincing at what happened to Ida. "Wasn't trapping him in the ground enough?" "Enough to win the battle, yes. Enough to keep this lesson in his memory, maybe. But just to make sure, I might as well hammer the point in," Sai explained. "Speaking of the point, Ida, do understand why you failed so quickly? Was my attack predictable?" "Ugh." Ida groaned as he recovered from the explosion. "Very good. I could see the gears turning in your head, and yet your strategy was just run at me in a straight line really fast, and kick me in the head," Sai told him bluntly. "Given your quirk, that is literally the most predictable strategy you could have gone with. Remember, not all villains are idiots, and you are all going to be public figures, meaning they're going to know your quirk in advance, so they'll likely figure you out completely if you don't mix up your strategies. Lastly, watch your step. Your quirk is very reliant on the terrain you're running on, so any opponent of yours is going to want to mess with the ground in order to defeat you." "I understand. I will take this lesson to heart. Thank you for imparting your wisdom on me," Ida said, getting up and bowing to her. "You're welcome," Sai said, a little off-put by his appreciation despite her blowing him up. Next, now it was Okako's time, and she was nervous as can be. She stood on the opposite side of the room, in a battle stance, sweat rolling down her face, as she wondered how painful this was going to be. "Alright, let's begin," Sai signaled. Okako wasted no time. 18%. Immediately, she dashed right at Sai. However, she didn't make the same mistake as Ida. She watched her step carefully. Sai had made a few portals in the floor, to try and trip her up, but Okako skillfully avoided them, as she quickly ran at Sai. At least they're learning. Sai thought as she let Okako approach her. "Alright, I'll make it look like I'm trying to attack her from the front, then I'll circle around her, and attack her from behind." Okako's train of thought was suddenly disrupted, when Sai rushed forward and kicked her to the ground. When Okako looked back up, she saw numerous portals opened above her, with swords aimed down at her. Kaboom! Explosive swords slammed into Okako, engulfing her in a huge blast. "Remember what I said, expectations?" Sai asked the class. "You've already seen the disadvantages in playing into a foe's expectations, but this the advantage of setting an expectation, and defying it." "Well, a broken bar, I definitely didn't expect that," Okako groaned. "I'm willing to bet none of you would have." Sai continued, "After all, I've spent all of the previous battles standing completely still, and only using my quirk. I conditioned you to think only about my quirk, and so you completely overlooked the possibility of me just punching or kicking you, which is another thing. Sometimes, you don't always need to rely on your quirk. Basic punches and kicks, or even using weapons or tools in the environment, can prove effective against certain foes. Now, on to the next foe." And so the lesson as beatings went on, with Sai utterly destroying 1A, and poking at their most damning flaws. Kaminari lacked staying power and needed to find a way to stop short-circuiting his own brain. Kirishima and Sato had an issue in that both lacked mobility, meaning they could be easily trapped, or just kept at bay. Shoji made himself too big a target. Jiro was very reliant on her support gear. Sero was reliant on his environment. Tokoyami, aside from having little to defense against light, was left defenseless when dark shadows strayed too far away from him, making it harder to defend against multiple opponents or opponents that could attack from multiple angles. Todoroki's ice blocked his field of vision, giving his opponents the chance to pull something sneaky. He was also too reliant on brute forcing his way through situations using his overwhelming power. Shinso relied too much on stealth and had little in the ways of actually fighting someone without his quirk. Mint a broken bar was too cowardly, and it left a lot of openings. Momo was very indecisive. Ojiro and Taru, funny enough, got the least amount of criticism, with Sai telling them they were doing just fine. They just lacked power, which wasn't their fault, nor could they do much to fix that situation. They could only really improve on what their areas of expertise were. And by the end of the day, Class 1A was left lying on the floor, exhausted, and covered in burns. Meanwhile, Sai was standing on the side, looking a bit winded and drinking an energy drink, all the portals she opened having made her a bit tired. "Honestly, not as bad as I thought. Too strong," Mineta groaned. "I can't believe she lost to that cat girl." Sai shot him a mean glare, that caused Mineta to freeze. "As heroes, you're going to have to find that certain heroes have types of villains they go well against, and some they do poorly against, sometimes regardless of skill," Sai explained, sounding very annoyed. "My quirk does poorly against foes with high mobility, and mobility is something Sori excels at, not to mention her enhanced senses making it easy for her to keep track of my portals. She's a powerful, and surprisingly skilled fighter, with an advantage against me, so I wouldn't say her narrow victory against me was surprising. Perhaps you'd like to see an up-close demonstration of her skills? I'm sure she'd be more than happy to show you them." No, I'm good," Mineta shouted in fear. "Yeah, we saw enough of them. We're good," Sero agreed. "Please have mercy," Kaminari begged. "That's what I thought," Sai smirked. "I'll leave you with this, as tempting as it is to focus on coming up with new techniques and strengthening your quirks. None of that will help you if a villain exploits your weaknesses and kills you 5 seconds into the battle. Work with each other, don't avoid sparring matches against people you know you can't beat, because even if you can't win, you may learn something." With that, Sai exited, leaving the students to linger on her words for all of 5 seconds. "Hey class reps, before you sign us up for an ass kicking, can you at least warn us first?" Sero groaned. "Noted," Ida replied. Author's notes. Alright, getting close to the next arc, I decided to give this chapter to Sai, as Sori already got like 3 chapters, whereas Sai only got 1, and before anyone complains about how easily she beat the 1A students, Mirio beat them even easier, when they were stronger than they were here, and he beat them all at the same time. Anyway, the next chapter should be the last chapter until the next arc, chapter 123, Insecurity. Ugh. Kiba groaned as she opened up her eyes. She quickly recognized that she was in the med wing, having been here quite often. What? How did I? Oh right, sorry. Kiba grimaced, as she recalled how she got here. Her fight with the Catwoman had been quick. Both in that, the two of them moved at extremely high speeds, and in that, it didn't last very long. She felt frustration well up inside her fist clenching and her face contorting into a pout. Her losing wasn't the worst part. She knew how strong she was, so just losing wouldn't have stung that badly. But she didn't just lose. She didn't land a single hit on her. No matter how she attacked, Sori would just dodge or redirect, or interrupt her attacks, and counter with an attack of her own. And she hit where it hurt, something Kiba recalled clearly, as even now her body ached in the spots where Sori had struck her. Ugh. Kiba groaned as she shook her head, trying to free herself of her frustration. Hey, I can't be petty. I lost because I lacked skill. I just need to improve, and then I'll beat her. Kiba, are you awake? Kiba looked to the side of her bed and saw Eri looking at her with a concerned expression. You really need to be more careful. You can't keep ending back up here. Eri lightly scolded her. While checking her bandages, Eri had taken to patching up the other kids in the medbay after their fights. As such, she had tended to Kiba many times. Maybe I just like seeing my favorite unicorn, Kiba remarked, giving Eri an cheeky grin. In response, Eri gave her a stern frown. HMPH. Fine, I will be more cautious. Kiba pouted, looking away from Eri in shame, as both of them knew this song and dance well. Please, do, Eri begged her, before looking over her wounds again. Everything looks okay. I think you should be able to go now. Dinner should be ready soon, but before you go, drink this. Eri turned around and grabbed the thermos that was on the desk next to her, before handing it to Kiba. More blood? Kiba asked, opening it up and looking inside, to see the red, thick liquid inside. However, when she gave it a sniff, she could tell something was off. Why does it smell so sweet? It's my blood, Eri told her, with an uncomfortable and slightly disgusted expression on her face. Kiba frowns, and her face somehow got even paler. A broken bar? What? It's my blood, Eri repeated, looking away from her. I want you to drink it. There was a long stretch of very uncomfortable silence between the two, as Kiba was too stunned to respond and Eri didn't have anything else to say. Eventually, Kiba managed to compose herself enough to ask the question that was on her mind. Eri, why do you want me to drink your blood? Well, Izuku said if you keep getting hurt, you might get permanent injuries. Drinking my blood helps prevent permanent injuries, Eri explained. It also slows down aging, helps your immune system, and a lot of other good things. Your blood does all that? Kiba shouted in shock, looking over Eri's body in disbelief. You really are a unicorn, Eri nodded. It's why people want it so badly. Izuku says I have to be careful. People are always going to be after my blood, so I have careful. Kiba kept looking at her, all sorts of emotions rushing through her at once. All that power, in such a small, fragile body. And Kiba knew exactly what someone would do to get it, someone like Overhaul. Just thinking about him sent a pang of white-hot rage through her body. Rage. And fear. I promised no one would hurt you, Kiba reminded her solemnly. Never again. I know, but please don't kill anyone, Eri asked her, giving her a strained smile. And please drink it. I'm worried about you. Kiba looked down at the blood. Normally she'd just scarf it down, enjoy the flavor, but this wasn't just any blood. It was Eri's blood. This was the stuff that ruined Eri's life. This was the stuff that would cause who knows how many people to come after Eri, to try and do the same stuff Overhaul did. It smelled so sweet, but Kiba couldn't find it anything but utterly disgusting. But saying that to Eri after she went through the trouble of getting this for her, was likely not the smartest move. And so Kiba sucked it up and brought the cup to her mouth. Iri's blood had a broken bar, a unique taste to it. One that Kiba could only describe as very Iri-like. It was sweeter than any blood she tasted before, but there was also this unidentifiable flavor to it, something she'd never tasted before. A shame. Kiba would have liked it if it hadn't caused Iri so much pain. Once Kiba finished scarfing it down, she looked at Iri. They're done. It was very a broken bar bloody. Iri gave her a confused look, and Kiba's face turned red with embarrassment. Bloody? Really? Out of all the things I could have said, bloody? Kiba internally facepalmed. At first, she wanted to say it tastes good, but she was unsure if that was the wrong thing to say, but she wasn't sure if saying it tasted bad was the wrong thing to say, so she ended up saying a broken bar that. Well, I'm famished, so I think I'll be heading to dinner. Thanks for the checkup, bye, Kiba shouted, as she bolted off the bed and ran out of the room. Iri looked on as Kiba fled, before looking down at her arm. I hope that helps. After dinner, Kiba decided to go to her room, and play some superhero bash. Currently, Kiba was playing against the CPU, readying herself to take on some opponents online. Knock knock. Kiba, can I come in? Izuku asked from outside. Immediately, Kiba paused her game and responded, you may enter. Izuku came in and immediately started looking over Kiba, with a worried look in his eye. I see you've recovered enough. Of course, no battle could ever keep me down for long, Kiba stated confidently. So what brings you here so late at night, caretaker? Well, I just wanted to check up on you, and make sure you're okay, Izuku explained, giving her a comforting smile. Do you need anything? A drink? Food? Anything? Kiba was about to say no when suddenly, an idea came into her head. No, I can't ask for that. Daddy needs his sleep. I can't ask him to a broken bar boot to broken bar. It's been so long. Well, a broken bar, caretaker. It has been a while since we played games together. Kiba's face was bright red from embarrassment and shame, and she had to look away from Izuku while she talked. So broken bar, if you're not too tired, a broken bar, actually forget about it. I'm sure you've been working hard all day and need your rest. Excuse my selfish request. Plop. Kiba suddenly felt the couch sag next to her, and she looked over to see Izuku had sat down next to her. So, where is the controller? Izuku asked. Wait caretaker, you should rest. I will not allow you to overwork yourself for my sake again, Kiba protested, pouting heavily at her adopted father. Izuku shook his head. It's fine. Your Araka's been making sure I don't work too much while they're here, and besides, playing games with you isn't work, it's fun. Kiba turned away, to hide the huge grin that uncontrollably grew on her face in response. Well then I guess I have no choice. Prepare to feel my wrath. The next few hours of the night were spent playing games and discussing common interests, mainly heroes. So then Edshot literally went through the entire base, and knocked out 50 men in 6 seconds, before they could even think about shooting the hostages, Izuku said, as he continued playing, using Mirika to fight against Kiba's character, who happened to be Edshot. That's astounding, Kiba said, half amazed and half frustrated. Now if only he could do that here. Well, that would be a bit unfair, don't you think? Izuku laughed. I don't want to hear that from an All Might main, Kiba said, sticking her tongue out at him. Well, you've got me there, Izuku chuckled. They continued playing for a few more seconds before Edshot managed to stun Mirko, and then knock her off the stage. Game. I did it. I won, Kiba cheered, jumping up and throwing her hands up in celebration. Ah, I let my guard down for just a second. You've gotten a lot better since the last time we played, Izuku admitted. Indeed. I have been training with MAI for quite some time. Through countless losses, I have become far better than I was before, Kiba cackled. Fear my might, caretaker. Fear it. I'm shaking. Izuku laughed, looking at her with a look of amusement and affection. Well, I guess I should give you a reward then, huh? Kiba was turned around to ask him what he meant by that. She was suddenly enveloped by Izuku's arms, and lifted up. Caretaker, you are amazing, Izuku told her, as he held her close to his chest. And you don't have to impress anyone. Kiba was just overwhelmed with warm, happy feelings. Right now Izuku was giving her everything she needed, affection, validation, praise. It felt so indescribably good. Caretaker, this is an embarrassing position. Despite herself, Kiba lightly clung to Izuku, being careful not to crush him or anything. "Kiba, I told you that you don't need to impress anyone," Izuku reminded her gently. "You can keep the act up if you want, but sometimes I think it's okay to take off the filter and just do what you really want to do, just for a little while." Kiba paused. Do what she wanted to do, without the filter. Could she do that? The last time she did that, she tried to leave behind her persona entirely, and it was miserable. The Queen of Darkness persona was something that brought her great joy and comfort, but sometimes it could be a bit cumbersome when she wanted to express herself. So perhaps, just for tonight, she'd take off the mask and see what happens. "I love you, Daddy," Kiba said, as she hugged him a bit tighter, feeling a sense of embarrassment, but also relief at finally being able to say that. Izuku's face also went a bit red, both surprised that was the first thing that she said, and over the moon that she said it. "I love you too, Kiba." "Daddy, is there a way I can get stronger, like a lot stronger?" Kiba asked, sounding slightly distraught. "Well, you're already learning martial arts and you're regularly practicing with your quirk." Izuku moved to the bed and sat down, gently rocking Kiba in his arms like a baby, in a way that made Kiba feel very happy and extremely embarrassed. "Why, is something wrong?" "Eri gave me a cup of her blood because she was concerned about me," Kiba admitted, letting out a sigh filled with worry and frustration. "And it was because I lost a fight. And not just lost, I was beaten like a rag doll." "You lost to Sori, who is a well-trained bodyguard who was bred to be the strongest feline quirk bearer," Izuku told her, trying to show her that it wasn't that bad. "She has a lot more experience and skills than you." Side beat all of 1A without getting hit either. "Yeah, but none of them have to drink blood to get their power," Kiba yelled out in exasperation, before looking down at herself in dismay. "What's the point of hurting people for power, if I can't even use that power to protect them?" "First off, you're not hurting people," Izuku told her firmly. "Yes, you're taking blood, but people give that away all the time. Sometimes they give it away for free. It's a minor inconvenience. Second, most of the time, skill and experience trumps power. Not all the time, but most of the time." "I heard from Sori that even though she trained for years, exercising and eating in ways to maximize her growth, you still were just as fast as her, and decently stronger than her. But her training and experience let her get through the battle, and the only reason she didn't get hit was because she specifically focused on not getting hit because she knew a single hit from you could shift the tide of the battle." "You are strong, but everyone needs time to gain skills and experience before they can take on people like Sori." "Even All Might?" Kiba asked. Izuku shrugged. "Well, a rookie All Might could definitely beat Sori through pure power, but he better hope he's not fighting her in the city, because otherwise, he'd likely destroy everything around him. So yeah, I would say even he needed to gather skill and experience. Look at Mount Lady. She's new, so she lacks a lot of experience when dealing with villains, which is why she keeps causing so much property damage. Which is why, despite being powerful, she keeps losing popularity contests to Washington." Kiba snickered. "Wash is funny. The fact that one of our top heroes is a washing machine with googly eyes never fails to make me laugh. That's another reason Wash keeps getting so high up in those rankings," Izuku said before his expression turned serious. "Now, I want you to tell me more about Eri giving you her blood." Eri was just laying down in her bed, unable to fall asleep. Was it because of the phantom pain coming from her left arm after she carved it open with a knife earlier? No, she'd long since gotten used to phantom pains. Eri could sleep through those no problem, especially this. This was nothing compared to what she felt while under overhaul. The real reason Eri couldn't sleep is because of a broken bar inner conflict. Knock, knock, knock. "Eri, are you awake in there?" Izuku asked, although he didn't sound as gentle as normal, and his tone carried a sense of urgency. Yes, Eri responded as soon as she could. Come in." Izuku opened the door and entered the room, and he did not look happy. "Eri, I heard that you gave Kiba some of your blood," Izuku said, but Eri could tell something was wrong. His tone was ice cold, something that was kind of freaking Eri out a little bit. "I'd like to know how you got it out of you." Eri started sweating, looking away from Izuku as feelings of fear, dread, and guilt rose up inside her. Izuku looked over her sternly. "Eri, Did you cut yourself on purpose to draw blood to give to Kiba? I just wanted to help. Eri defended herself, pretty much admitting to what Izuku accused her of. You said if Kiba keeps getting hurt she might get a permanent injury. And you said my blood can help with that. That doesn't mean you can cut yourself open, Izuku almost shouted at her, his voice full of anger and concern. Just because you can heal yourself, doesn't mean you should be hurting yourself. But my blood can help, Eri argued. You said my blood can help people, so why don't we use it more? We're already using it to help people, Eri, Izuku argued back, crossing his arms and giving her a stern look. That's why we're taking some every month. But why don't we use it here? Eri asked, looking like she was on the verge of tears. We could use it to make sure they don't get sick, or stop permanent injuries or Eri. Izuku cut her off, taking the edge out of his tone, and once again speaking gently. What's this about? Yeah, broken bar, I'm not as useful as my blood, Eri said, looking down with shame. I still can't control my quirk, so I still can't help anyone with it. But my blood can. So broken bar, even if it hurts a beat. A broken bar, Izuku sighed. Eri, you and Kiba are more alike than you might think. You both lack patience for one, and you both don't value yourselves enough. It takes time to master a quirk, and you're already so much closer to controlling it than you were before. Eri still looked unsure. Also, remember, your quirk runs on a limited amount of energy. If you keep using your quirk to heal yourself, you might run out of energy and not be able to use your quirk when you really need it, Izuku explained, seeing Eri's eyes widen. It'll also leave you with less energy to use for practice, meaning it'll take you even longer to learn how to use your quirk. Eri stayed silent, although she did look considerably more regretful. Izuku patted her on the head. I understand not feeling like you are useful, but you're just a child. None of the adults are expecting you to be as capable as them. No matter what your quirk is, what you're doing with your quirk training and you're helping out in the med bay, is more than enough. And if something happens where your blood is absolutely necessary to fix an issue, I will talk to you about it, and we can extract it in safer, less painful ways, understood? Eri nodded somberly. Good. Now, you're grounded for tomorrow. After 1A leaves, I want you to stay in your room, and stay there until dinner. Understood? Izuku told her. Once again Eri nodded somberly. Alright, well, then I'll see you tomorrow, Izuku said before letting out a sigh. I'm not angry with you, Eri. I'm just concerned. You know I hate it when you kids hurt yourself. I'm sorry, Eri said quietly, looking down rather than at Izuku. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to yourself. You're the one you disrespect. You're the one that you hurt. And remember, when you're hurt, it hurts your family too, Izuku told her, causing Eri to wince in shame. Just remember that whenever you feel like hurting yourself. Good night. And with that Izuku left, letting Eri reflect on her actions. It was the next day, and all of 1A was outside, with the kids right behind them, with Sori and Sai standing in front of them. The time had come for 1A to leave, and by now everyone had said their goodbyes and were just waiting for the school to them up. I am here to pick you up, All Might shouted from inside a school bus that was driven by Aizawa. All Might, Sai muttered, her eyes fixed on the number 1 hero. You've met? Sori asked her curiously. Sai shook her head. No, Buta Broken Bar. I did always want to work together with him. I wanted to witness that overwhelming power in person. Yeah, I get that. I always wanted to fight him. Sori smirked, cracking her knuckles. You'd lose, immediately, Sai said, giving her a deadpan stare. Maybe. Still wanna give it a shot though. Sori shrugged. Izuku opened up the gate, and the bus came inside. Aizawa drove up to the house, parking just in front of the grim tree, before parking. Ahaha. Good to see you, young Midoriya. I'm glad to see you've hired some help, All Might said, stepping out of the bus and looking over at Sai and Sori before leaning down and whispering. And by the way, how's the situation without American friends? Everything going well for now. I'll tell you if anything goes wrong, Izuku whispered back. All Might nodded, before turning his attention to 1A. It's good to see you all again, students. You all look a bit stronger than when you first got here. I'm just glad none of you have been skipping out on your training, Aizawa said, also getting out of the bus, looking just as tired as usual. As if, I train every day to be the manliest man I can be, Kirishima said, flexing his muscles. We'd never slack off on our training, sir, Ida said, chopping the air like he normally does. Yeah, we've been working hard over here, sir. It was wild, Mina shouted. I'm glad to hear it, All Might said. Now let's be RRRRRRR. Suddenly, Izuku's phone came to life and blared out a loud alarm noise. Huh? Izuku quickly took out his phone, and saw a big red notification on it that said, Intruder alert. What? Izuku shouted out in shock, but before he could press on the notification, a swirling vortex of black mist appeared in front of the bus, behind Aizawa. Aizawa's eyes widened, and he immediately jumped back. Sai and Sori ran in front of Izuku, pulling him behind them. As the vortex got bigger and bigger, Sensei, what's going on? Momo asked, confused and a little scared. I don't know, but stay behind us, All Might said, standing in front of the class. By now the vortex had gotten big enough to eclipse the bus completely, and out of the smoke came an army of people, of all different shapes and sizes, but what they all had in common was that all of them looked incredibly vicious. Soon a small army had come through the portal, and in front of them was a man with light blue hair, who was covered in hands. All Might, Tamura Shigaraki said as he laid eyes on the number one hero, peering at him with a sadistic glee that promised terrible, terrible things. It's finally time for the symbol of peace to crumble. The League is here. Let the attack begin. Chapter 124, Under Attack Part 1. Author's Notes. Hey, just wanted to give a heads up. In this, the USJ Namu will be named Ruin, because there are a bunch of Namu here, so just saying Namu do this would be ineffective. Anyway, on to the story. With the proclamation of All Might's imminent death, it was now completely safe to assume that these people were villains. Damn it, they have a warping quirk. There's no way my security could have stopped that. Izuku though, as he took a good look at the villains, the vast majority of them just seemed like basic thugs, although many of them seemed to have mutation quirks. Their leader stood in front of all of them, and to his sides were some rather broken bar off-putting people, mainly because they all had their brains exposed in some way. The biggest one was a giant about the size of All Might and even more muscly. It had pitch black skin and a beak-like face, its brain completely exposed, and it wore a pair of beige shorts, with skulls on its kneecaps. Next to it was a similar-looking creature, with black skin. However, its face was mostly hidden by skin that went over its head like a hood, but Izuku could just barely see its brain peeking out. It had a very bad hunch, making it almost seem like a quadruped, and its neck was far longer than normal. On the other side of Shigaraki was another hulking figure, although this one was more tall than muscular, being 2 heads taller than All Might. Its body was mostly covered in what looked like a tight leather trench coat, with the only part of its body that was visible being its head, which much like the other two, had its brain exposed, and under it were dirty piano key-like teeth, with skin stretched out around it. The last one was rather different from the other three. Its body had a shape that was almost exactly like a normal human, although it possessed a red long tail that went from its waist to the floor, and 2 long purple horns coming out of the side of its head, and curving behind it, with its brain between them. Its body was mostly covered in purple armor, although the armor appeared to be part of its body, with some exposed red areas on its stomach, arms, and face. Lastly, it also had some bits of white armor over its forearms and legs, although, unlike the others, this one looked more alive and had a look of malicious glee in its yellow eyes. Just as all the villains finished stepping out of the portals, the Grimm came in. Various Grimm came from out of the forest surrounding, coming in through the gates to get closer to the villains. The Knuckle AV came running out of the forest. Meanwhile, a hound jumped off the roof, and a wyvern soared into view. I don't know who you are, but I'd suggest surrendering now, All Might told Shigaraki, flashing him his signature grin. Because I am here. Also, you are surrounded by an army of nightmare beasts, Aizawa pointed out, as the Grimm completely surrounded the villains, growing menacingly, waiting for them to make a move. Oh, we are aware of what we're up against, which is why we've come prepared, Shigaraki said confidently. Ruin, why don't you show him what the anti-symbol of peace can do? Kill him. Suddenly, The giant creature, with its brain exposed, apparently called Ruin, rushed forward at a speed that most of the people there couldn't even see, but All Might could, and he moved just as fast towards the beast. Both of them cocked their arms back and got ready to throw a punch. Shroom! Their fists connected, creating a shockwave so powerful it kicked up storm like winds, forcing everyone to guard their faces and look away. When they looked back, they saw the two fights, their fists still touching, and the Nama seemed completely unaffected. Oh shit! Kaminari summed up everyone's feelings at that time, as everyone on the hero's side looked at the scene in absolute shock, All Might included. This was the first sign that this was not going to be an easy battle, but with the first attack thrown, the Grim descended onto the villains. Immediately, the villains started fighting back, some of them winning, some not so much. Meanwhile, the more powerful Grim also started rushing in as well, the L.O.V running in from behind, the Hound from the front, and the Wyvern dived at them from the sky. Nemesis, kill the horse. Janbu, kill the dog. Hood, take the dragon. Shigaraki ordered. Immediately, the purple and red Namu, Janambu, turned towards the Hound and shot out its arm, which stretched and extended out like Play-Doh, grabbing the Hound by the throat and throwing it to the side. The Hound rolled for a bit, before digging its claws into the ground, and stopping itself. And while it was doing that, Janemba's body came apart, turning into tiny little blocks, that flew behind the Hound. Janemba reformed itself behind the Hound and tried to stomp on it, but the Hound jumped back, dodging the attack, as Janemba's foot smashed into the ground. The Hound lunged at Janemba, however, the foot that Janemba smashed into the ground, extended through the ground, and popped out, kicking the Hound in the jaw, and sending it flying back, landing on its spine. Ah ha 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 ha! Janemba let out a high-pitched evil laugh, seemingly enjoying this. Meanwhile, the tall trench-coated one, Nemesis, turned towards the L.O.V and raised its arm up at it as it charged towards it. Then, its arm began to morph and change shape, turning into huge cannon. Kaboom! Nemesis shoots out a huge blast from its arm cannon, impacting the L.O.V's human torso. As the L.O.V stopped its charge and roared in pain. The shot had destroyed most of its rib bones, and destroyed most of its right arm. Then Nemesis raised its other arm and shot a tentacle out of a hole on its wrist. The tentacle wrapped around the horse's head, and Nemesis jerked his arm to the side, dragging the L.O.V to the side, and causing it to fall on its side. Lastly, the hooded one, Hood cocked back its arm, and then shot it out at the Wyvern, its long arm extending at rapid speed, and smashing the Wyvern in the face. The Wyvern cried out, as the blow hit it so hard, that it broke off part of its mask. It threw its head back, and panicky flapped its wings, trying to get away from Hood for the moment. But Hood was having none of that. Its shoulders morphed, transforming into jets, and Hood took to the sky after the Wyvern. All the while, All Might and Ruin had gotten into a punching match, the two throwing at rapid-fire punches, so fast and powerful that it created a whirlwind that kept anyone else from getting close. What the hell? What are these guys? Mineta shouted, shaking in fear at the powerful foes battling it out in front of him. It's like they have multiple quirks, Izuku noticed, looking at the enemy with fear in his eyes. Multiple quirks, could they be working for All for One? Everyone, get inside, Aizawa said, getting ready to jump into the fray. We will take care of this, Sai said, as she, Aizawa, and Sai got ready to fight. You want us to just leave? Kirishima asked in shock and outrage. But we can help, Okako objected. You can, and you will, be guarding Midoriya and the kids, Aizawa said sternly. Yeah, if you guys watch over them, that means we can focus on taking down these bastards, Sori said, cracking her neck. Very well, everyone get inside, Ida said, turning to the children. All of you as well. But we can help too, Netsu argued, his flames spiking in power as he got fired up. Yeah, let us kick these guys' butts, Ken said, holding up his Omnitrix. These villains will suffer for daring to invade my home, aka shouted in rage. We can at least take the weaker ones, Nara added, trying to sound somewhat reasonable. Absolutely not. Izuku stepped in and looked at the children with a stern glare. All of you may be powerful, But you are also children. This is an army of real, actual killers, some of which look to be incredibly strong. We are going to the training room, and locking ourselves inside. None of you are fighting unless you absolutely have to. Now let's go. Now, Fu sent out a few of Kyozai's tendrils out, and wrapped them around Ken, Kiba, and aka, before starting to run towards the house. Hey, let us go or I swear you'll regret it, aka cursed as she struggled against Kyozai's reach. Not letting any of you do anything rash, Fu explained, before looking back at everyone else. Come on guys, let's go. Izuku, 1A, and the kids all started to run away from the battle, some more reluctantly than others, with some also looking back at the adults who would soon be entering the battles. However, the last one to enter was K, who suddenly stopped, her eyes widening as she remembered something. Wait, what about Kai? I already texted him about the situation. The information should have gone straight to the screen in his room, Izuku told her, as he picked her up. I told him to stay in his room and hide until the situation is over. There's nothing else we can do, let's go. Izuku carried her inside, and with that, all of them had made it into the house. Alright, now that they're gone, Sori smirked, as she set her sights on Shigaraki, who was standing in the middle of the grim, villain war that was happening, watching All Might battle ruin. Take out the leader. Wait, Sori before Sai could finish. Sori lunged at Shigaraki, at lightning quick speeds, cutting through the air like a knife. Sori's smirk grew as she was only a few feet away from Shigaraki, and she got ready to punch him. Eat shit, asshole. However, once she was close, suddenly, a figure appeared next to her out of nowhere, and punched her in her side, sending her rolling across the ground. Ack, Sori hissed, as she rolled to her feet, quickly getting to her knee and holding her right side. Fuck, that stung. Sori looked up at the person who'd hit her, glaring at him intensely. The person was a man, wearing a long black coat, and big black boots. His skin was dark purple, and he was also completely bald. He looked back at her coldly, standing with his hands in his pockets. Glad you're earning your pay, Hit, Shigaraki said, name-dropping the assailant. Hit didn't respond, not taking his eyes off Sori. Alright, you wanna play? Sori got up and extended her claws. Let's play. Sori dashed forward, moving faster than most people could react, and reaching Hit in no time at all. She launched her arm forward to scratch his chest, but he suddenly vanished, and her claws hit nothing. Sori didn't even have time to process that, as at the same time, Hit appeared beside her, and punched her in the side again. She stumbled back holding her side yet again, as she processed what just happened. Fast, but not fast enough, Hit replied, his voice cool and calm. It'd be rather soothing if he weren't trying to kill her. Hiss. Sori glared at Hit, but before she could attack, suddenly all she saw was purple. Smash, 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 smash. Sori cried out in pain, as she was suddenly struck from multiple places in stupidly quick succession. Sori fell to one knee, her body aching with pain from all the hits she had just taken. Damn it, this guy's no joke. I need to figure out how his quirk works. Looks like teleportation or something, but it's too damn fast, and there's no glow or effect or anything. He just disappears and reappears somewhere else. Need to rely on my senses. She heard something behind her, and she quickly spun around and tried to kick him, only for the presence to vanish and reappear behind her, before punching her in the spine. Fork. Sori cursed, turning around to try and grab Hit, only for Hit to vanish, now being a few yards away. Sori took some time to breathe, and think. Hey, it's not teleportation. When he vanished, he reappeared in a completely different pose. Then how the hell is he doing this? Some kind of time manipulation. Shit, I need to focus. Seeing that Sori was in trouble, Aizawa and Sai were about to step in. However, suddenly, some strings wrapped around Aizawa and threw him into the air. Eraserhead. Sai was about to open a portal to cut the strings on Aizawa while he was flying away, but her attention was suddenly shifted to something more imminent. She shot out a wall of swords out next to her, as a red bolt of lightning-like energy smashed into it. Shoom! The energy exploded, destroying the swords, and forcing Sai to look away as the force from the explosion almost swept her away. When she looked back, she saw her swords were destroyed, and standing on the other side of the destroyed sword wall, was a figure shrouding in smoke from the explosion. "Finally, after all this time I finally found you," said the figure in a tough-sounding, female voice. The figure stepped out of the smoke and was revealed to look exactly like a teenage version of Sai. She wore a red tube top, and a pair of very short shorts, as well as a red leather jacket and red shoes. In her hand a gray sword, with a red handle, and a bit of red going down the base of the sword. "Surprised to see me, father?" the girl shouted, glaring intensely at Sai. "What?" Sai responded, giving her the most confused look she'd ever given in her life. "Don't play innocent. Now you'll finally pay for abandoning me and mom, you freaking deadbeat," the enraged girl shouted as she held her sword up. Suddenly, that red electricity emanated from her body, frying the ground around her. The energy poured into her sword, surrounding it with that red energy. She then swung his sword at Sai, unleashing a slash of red lightning-like energy at Sai. In response, Sai opened a portal in front of her and shot out an explosive sword at the slash. Boom! The sword hit the energy and exploded, but the energy just kept coming. Sai's eyes widened, and she barely managed to jump to the side in time, her arm getting grazed by the energy as she dodged. Sai held her arm burning with pain, and she could see the wound through her torn sleeve. Sheet. Sai looked back at her young doppelganger and saw her unleashing a few more energy slashes at her. Not having much time to dodge, Sai made another wall of swords in front of her. This time it was a two-layer wall rather than a single layer one. The energy slashes crashed into the wall, exploding against it, and breaking quite a few swords, but not fully destroying the wall. Sai looked at her doppelganger through the broken parts of the wall and opened a bunch of portals around her, with sword tips peeking out, ready to be fired. The doppelganger raised her sword, and the red lighting exploded off of it, shooting bolts all over the place, destroying all the swords that were about to be launched at her. She then ran out, leaping between the portals, and running at Sai, unleashing an even more powerful energy slash at Sai's sword wall. Boom! AGH! The slash hit, exploding and tearing the wall apart, causing Sai to go flying, and land on her back. She groaned in pain for a moment, before forcing herself to sit up. "She's strong, die, fast." Sai looked up and saw the girl had jumped into the air, and was now descending down on her, with her sword covered in red lightning, and pointed down at her. Sai quickly opened the portal next to her and grabbed onto the hilt of a rocket sword, that dragged her away from her current position. As her doppelganger slammed into the ground, her sword stabbing into the ground, discharging red energy into the ground, causing it to explode. Fortunately, Sai was out of the blast radius, her rocket sword carrying her a few yards away before it ran out of fuel, and the sword's hilt stopped spewing fire. Sai was dragged a couple more feet before coming to a halt. Both Sai and her younger doppelganger brought themselves to their feet and glared at each other. "Hey!" Suddenly her doppelganger smirked. "You're just as strong as I thought you'd be. Glad you're not leaving me disappointed." A broken bar for once. "Okay, look, I do not have time for a broken bar, whatever this is," Sai said firmly. "I have no idea who you are, but I can assure you, I am not your father. As you can see, I am a woman. You're probably confusing me for my brother, or perhaps one of my many sisters, although I'm fairly certain none of them possessed male genitalia the last time I saw them." "You're the former hero Saber, right?" the look-alike asked. Sai nodded her head in response. "Then I'm not mistaken. You're my bastard father who ran out on mom the moment you found out she was pregnant." Sai rubbed her temple in frustration. "Firstly, that's impossible because I've never had a lover, and I am a woman. Secondly, I would never, ever do such a thing. And third, even if I did do something deplorable, that doesn't justify murder. Like I care about justifying shit. You made my life hell. I'm gonna kill you," the girl said, angrily raising her sword. "And since you probably ran away before I got named, I'll tell you who's about to send you straight to hell. My name is Konashi. No die, you freaking deadbeat." Meanwhile, Aizawa had been dragged away to the outskirts of the fighting area and was dragged along the ground by the strings. Aizawa reached for his short blade, and cut the strings around his waist. Although they were very tough, had his blade not been top of the line, he wouldn't have been able to cut them. Once Aizawa came to halt and picked himself up, He heard a voice speak to him. "Oh my, you cut through my threads. That must be a pretty nice knife you got there," said an annoyingly cutesy voice. Aizawa looked up and saw a young woman standing in front of him. She was about average height, although her blonde hair was about as big as her, styled into two massive drills, with some smaller locks framing her face and a massive pink bow. She wore a pink Lolita-style dress, with matching boots and fingerless gloves, and a pink heart choker. She looked at him with a cute smile, but Aizawa could see her sinister intention in her eyes, looking at him like he was her new toy, one that she looked forward to breaking. Immediately, Aizawa activated his quirk, hoping whoever this was didn't know who he was, and underestimated him. The girl pouted. "Hey, what did you just do? My quirk isn't working right all of a sudden." "Good, she doesn't know who I am. Hopefully, I can end this quickly." Aizawa thought to himself, as he rushed forward at the girl, and punched her in the face. And the moment Aizawa's fist connected with her face, he realized something was wrong. It didn't feel like he was punching flesh, it felt like he was punching steel strings. And all punching her seemed to do, was tilt her head a bit, and hurt his own hand. Realizing his mistake, Aizawa jumped back, and the girl pouted at him. "You heroes really don't know how to treat a lady." The girl flashed him a menacing smile. "Guess I better teach you a lesson. I can't use my quirk like I am used to, so I'm gonna have to improvise. I've never beat a man to death before, but Mama always said to try new things." Aizawa grit his teeth and pulled out his blade. "Hey, I hope the kids have at least made it to the safety." Izuku, 1A, and the kids were currently in the entry hall, looking on at what was in front of them in fear and anger. Eri in particular was frozen stiff with fear, her body trembling. No number. Blocking their path were former Yakuza members, Rappa, Deidorosake, Sorimitsu, Yuhojo, Toya Setsuno, Riki Yakatsu came, and Chronostasis. "Hello Eri," Chronostasis said. He's carrying a clamp fury that reminded Eri far too much of Overhaul. "It's been a while." Author's note. So yeah, the league stepped up their game. Now let me explain a few things. Firstly, why is Hood here? Simply put, the League of Villains is not gonna last long enough to get to the point where Hood is canonically supposed to be, so I'm just gonna use him here. Second, why are some of the Yakuza members missing, specifically Mimic and Shin? I didn't have anything for them to do, so they're still in prison. The League couldn't get all of them. Alright, that should be it for now. Chapter 125, Under Attack Part 2. Stay away from her. Kiba instantly got in front of Eri, taking a defensive stance in front of the girl. Ken, Nara, Netsu, Fu, Sansen, and Yami quickly doing the same. "So you must be the creeps that tortured Eri," Mina said, glaring at them. "I've been wanting to kick your asses for a while." "Yeah, time to pay for what you did to Eri, scumbags," Kirishima said, hardening himself and getting ready for battle. Okako activated One for All at 15% and turned to Izuku and the kids. "Izuku, take the kids and get to the safe room." "Alright, but we need to get these guys off the stairway first," Izuku said, looking at all the villains lined up on the stairs, blocking their way. "No problem," Todoroki said, going out in front and shooting out a massive blast of fire, aiming just above the staircase, so as not to set it on fire too. All the villains jumped off the staircase, dodging the fire, which hit the back of the wall, setting it on fire as well. "I knew getting him to use his fire was a good idea." Yonda thought to herself, smirking proudly. "Kill them," Chrono ordered. Yeah, this is gonna be fun." Rappa smiled, as he and the others ran at 1A, who went to fight them off. Izuku and all the children ran up the stairs, many of the children looking down at the fights surround them, wishing they could help. "Damn it, I feel so useless." Akiba grit her teeth so hard it hurt, feelings of anger, fear, and self-loathing flooding her body. One day I'll fight too. As Izuku and the kids reached the third floor, they quickly ran into the hallway heading towards the training room. "They're going to be okay, right?" Ka asked, looking very worried, many of the children sharing a similar expression. "They will be," Izuku lied. In truth, he had no idea if everyone was going to be okay, but he couldn't tell the kids that, otherwise they'd insist on joining the fight. "All they have to do is hold off the villains until reinforcements come." I've already sent a message to the police. They're sending heroes here to help with the situation. We just need to keep you all safe until they get here." All the children looked at each other worriedly, each having different thoughts on the matter. Damn it, I should have stayed back and fought them off. Ken hated the idea of running away. The only reason he followed Izuku's orders and did so was because the Namu outside had freaked him out a bit with their overwhelming abilities. Man, this sucks. I really wanted to kick those Yakuza guys' butts. Netsu thought, please be okay, please be okay, please be okay. Airi was still shaking, desperately hoping that this whole thing was another nightmare and that she'd wake up any moment. I hope 1A makes them suffer for hurting Eri. Kyaku thought, absolutely furious to see the former Yakuza out of prison. Oh, father, I hope you're right about this, father. Ayanda thought to herself before she noticed something. A broken bar, those voices, a broken bar. I don't recognize these thoughts. Alright, the training room is right around this corner, Izuku said to the children, as they approached a turning point in the hallway. Wait, father, stop. Ayanda stopped running along with everyone, as she tried to warn them all, but it was too late. Izuku and all the kids turned the corner and stopped when they saw what was in front of them. 4 more villains, standing right in front of the training room, which was locked tight. 2 of them were more of the same brain-exposed things that were outside. Both of them were massive hulking figures. One had gray skin, and rhino-like feet, as well as a rhino-like horn coming out of its forehead. The other had a dark green body, with bumpy reptile-like skin, and dragon-like claws. Its ears were pointy like a goblin's, and a face like that of a goblin as well. There also was a young boy present, around the same age as the other children. He wore a black cloak and an all-black outfit that complemented his pale skin. What's more, he was completely bald and had a rather bony face, almost a skeleton with skin. He looked at them with a cold, neutral expression. Lastly, there was a 9-foot-tall very pale woman, looking down on them, wearing an expensive-looking white dress, a pair of black heels, and a white sun hat. Her black hair was styled in a bun and her eyes were the most piercing blue Izuku had ever seen. Finally, "Hello children," the woman said kindly to the children, smiling at them, before turning to Izuku, her expression instantly morphing into that of disgust and fury. "Quirkless scum, I am Lady Kyokitsuki, and I am here to set things right, and save these children." "Somehow, I doubt that," Fu said, standing in front of Izuku, with quite a few of the other children doing the same. "Oh, but it's true, I'm here to save you all, from this quirkless piece of trash, and his brainwashing." Lady Q spat, glaring at Izuku with eyes full of hate and anger. "You children all have wondrous power, but those ignorant curs in the government decided to push you away to the edge of the city, treating you like outsiders rather than like the superior beings you are. And what's worse, they put you under the care of someone who doesn't even have the right to exist. Unforgivable. I'm here to correct this mistake, by killing this quirkless whelp, and taking you with me, to be given to more suitable parents. Except you." She pointed to Kiba, giving her a look that made Kiba's blood boil. It was an affectionate look, one that would normally make her feel good if it wasn't being given to her by someone she now utterly despised. "You, I will take as my own daughter," Lady Q explained, smiling fondly. Kiba looked down, her face covered in shadow. "I am going to beat you into a coma." And before anyone could stop her, Kiba rushed at Lady Q, kicking her in the abdomen so hard, that it sent her flying, across the hallway, and through the opposite wall. "Kiba!" Izuku called after her, but it was too late, as Kiba rushed after Lady Q, intent on fulfilling her promise. Seeing as the first punch was already thrown, the fight began. Ken and Nara activated their Omnitrixes. Ken transforms into 4 arms and Nara turning into Diamond Head. At the same time, the Goblin Namu, or just Goblin for short, shot a fireball out of its mouth, aimed right at the children. Nara ran in front, and slammed her hand into the ground, making diamonds rise up, forming a barrier. The fireball exploded against the crystal shield, cracking it, but not breaking it. "We can stand fire, get that thing away from us," Fu ordered. "Go it." Ken and Shraku ran past the crystal, ducking to dodge another fireball, before tackling the goblin, dragging him through the hallway, and sending him through the same wall Kiba had gone through. It was after this that the Rhino Namu, or just Rhino for short, rushed at them. Fu and Sanson both rushed into action, grabbing him with their tendrils, and trying to steer him to the left. It was difficult because of its immense power and weight, but they managed to turn it slightly towards the left, causing it to crash through a wall, taking Sanson and Fu with it. "I'm gonna help Ken and Shiraku. You guys protect Izuku," Nara said as she ran past the cloaked boy to help her brother. With all the other enemies gone, it was just the small boy in the cloak left. "Listen, I don't know who you are, but you don't need to do this." Izuku tried to reason with the child, desperately not wanting his children to have to hurt another child. Unfortunately, it seems his pleas fell on deaf ears, as the child just stared at them, before transforming their right arm into a scythe. Yami and Netsu went to the front, preparing to fight, but to their surprise, K pushed past them. "Sorry, but I won't let you hurt my family," K said as she got ready to lift up her visor. However, she never got the chance. Suddenly the boy rushed forward, moving at superhuman speeds, and cut K's arm. Everyone shouted in concern. K groaned in pain, as suddenly her body started to feel strange. "What's a broken bar happening?" And then her body began to change rapidly. Her snakes just vanished off her head. Her skin turned a pale white, as her body began to shift and change, her clothes doing the same, her usual white dress shifting color and becoming black, and changing shape. In just a few seconds, K had turned into an exact copy of the boy that had attacked her. Eri whispered, staring at the copy in fear and disbelief. "Sorry, K isn't here at the moment," the copy that was once K said in a cold, emotionless voice, turning to face the group. "Right now, you can call us Gami." "What did you do to K?" Fuku asked, tears spilling out of her eyes, as she did everything that she could to avoid spilling out her gas. "My quirk, it's called Death's Hand," the original Gami explained, raising up his scythe hand. "It allows me to transform my hands into scythes, and if anything gets cut with my scythe, I can kill any part of them, whether that be something physical, or not. In this case, I killed that girl's individuality, causing her to become an exact copy of whatever person she just touched, which was me. Hence the transformation," said the copy Gami. "But don't worry too much, my quirk only lasts for 9 minutes. Gami told them, before pointing his scythe at them. "Can you last that long? I wonder." "Damn it, I have to get the kids to safety, otherwise, they'll all just be turned into copies of that boy and be used to fight against Okako and the others." Izuku thought, looking towards the locked training room door. But the doors are locked, and Gami is standing right in front of them. "How do?" And then their saving grace appeared. Mew popped his head out of the side of the wall. "Everyone, come in here, I can get you into the room." "Mew," Fuka called out, happy to see her friend come to their rescue. "Not gonna happen," Gami said, rushing forward to cut Mew, only to be hit by a fireball. Gami flew back but didn't look to be in any pain, and the copy Gami had to dodge another fireball that Netsu threw at them. "Not on my watch, your speed won't take me by surprise again," Netsu said, running in front of Mew to protect him. Yami also ran forward, having created 2 lickers on his arms to use as weapons. "Everyone go." "Me and Yami will take these 2, Netsu ordered. Izuku clenched his teeth. He really didn't want to leave these kids to fight on their own, but at this point, he had no choice. "All right, be careful you two." Then, Izuku quickly helped all the other kids into Mew's portal, which took them through the wall, and out of another portal, which took them out of Mew's dimension before they started to decay. Eventually, it was only Izuku and AKA left. "Come on AKA, we need to go," Izuku said, about to grab AKA and take her with him through the portal. But she stepped back. "I'm afraid not. I need to help make these villains pay. I'm going to help Fu and Sanson destroy that rhino thing, and take over its body," AKA told him, before running through the hole Rhino made. Izuku looked at AKA as she ran, with a remorseful look. "It shouldn't have come to this." He then turned to Yami and Netsu. "You two, I believe in both of you, make me proud." Yami nodded. "Will do, Dad," Netsu said, giving him a heroic smile. Izuku smiled back, before jumping through the portal, leaving them to fend for themselves. Netsu and Yami turned back to the two Gamis and saw one of them cutting their arm, but the cut also appeared in the other one's arm, despite him not actually cutting himself. It was also then they noticed there were a few other shallow cuts on their arm. Then, they both rushed at Netsu. "Oh no, you don't." Netsu unleashed a flamethrower attack on the two of them, completely engulfing them in fire, only for them to jump out of the fire, right in front of him, with not a single burn on them. The only sign they'd been inside a fire at all was that all of their clothes had been incinerated off of them, leaving them both nude. But the bigger issue was that they were both descending on him, scythes ready to cut into him. However, Yami jumped back and had the liquor shoot out its tongue, wrapping around Netsu, and pulling him back just in time, as the two boys' scythes hit the floor instead. "That was close, thanks for the save, bro." Netsu thanked him, as Yami had his liquor detach its now burned tongue so it could grow a new one. As the two Gamis were pulling their scythes out of the floor, Yami opened his mouth and spat out a bunch of grim batter that turned into Ravagers before it even hit the ground. Soon the entire hallway was completely filled with Ravagers that attacked the two Gamis, distracting them for a while and obscuring their vision. Meanwhile, Yami rushed Netsu to the side of the hallway. "Must be killing weaknesses, makes them stronger, harder to fight." Killing weaknesses? Netsu thought about what Yami was saying for a moment. He thought back to how his fireball had damaged them at first, but after they cut themselves, it didn't. He also thought back to the other cuts he saw in their arm. Oh yeah, if they cut themselves and killed their weakness, I guess that would make them stronger. It explains why they're so darn fast. They must have just killed their flammability or something. Darn. Does that mean my quirk is useless now? Yami shook his head. All quirk have limit. All things burn if get too hot. Try making hotter flame. Netsu nodded. Alright, I'll try. And then suddenly, the floor started to creak and shake. Huh? Netsu looked down at the floor, while Yami jumped backward, concerned that something might pop out and attack, only for the floor to collapse, dropping them both down to the second floor. Meanwhile, Fu, Sansen, and Rhino had crashed through multiple walls and floors, ending up in the cafeteria. Rhino threw Fu off his leg, chucking him to the other side of the room, breaking a lot of his bones, which quickly started to heal. Sansen wrapped herself around Rhino's body, trying to restrain him, but to no avail. Rhino was simply too strong and started tearing pieces of her off him, eventually ripping her into so many different pieces that were now scattered all over the cafeteria, and shaking her off of him, before trying to stomp her to death, which of course didn't do much to her. While Rhino was attacking Sansen, Fu had finished regenerating and was wondering what to do. Looking at Rhino, and his exposed brain in particular, its skin is so thick, I'm not sure I can even put a dent in him. Fu thought. Too bad Sansen's not in her acid form. The only way I can think to defeat it would be to attack its brain. Only problem is that would definitely kill it. It's not that Fu couldn't kill. He definitely could, and he probably wouldn't feel too bad about it. Something he'd been horrified about the first time he thought about it. However, killing had consequences, and he's not sure how exactly those consequences would play out, or how they'd affect his Yuku. Plus he also didn't want to completely forsake his humanity, so he'd try a bit harder instead of immediately resorting to murder. And so instead, he charged at Rhino, jumping on his back while he was distracted, and making a bunch of tendrils before shoving them in Rhino's mouth, hoping to suffocate the monster into unconsciousness. Rhino's counter to this was simply, he bit down, severing the tendrils before spitting out the remaining parts of Kyozai that were still in his mouth. It then started to flail around wildly, trying to shake Fu off him, destroying the floor and all the tables around him. He tried to reach up and grab Fu off his back, but Fu was stuck on part of his back that he couldn't reach. Fu then just tried stabbing him with sharpened tendrils, but to no effect. Fu couldn't scratch it. Well, that didn't work. Alright, murder it is. Fu's tendrils were now pointed at Rhino's brain, ready to pierce it and kill the monster. Finally, I've found you at last. AKA suddenly ran into the cafeteria, ready to help, and immediately, she caught Rhino's attention, the beast of a man staring her down. Uh-oh, AKA said, realizing perhaps she shouldn't have announced her arrival. Rhino immediately started running towards her, but before he could get to her, Sanson slithered in front of him, letting him step on her, making him slip and fall on his face. Fu grabbed aka with one of his tendrils and kept her next to him. All you need to do is make a cut, and I shall take control over this creature's simple mind, aka told him. Yeah, I know, give me a second, Fu told her, going into deep thought as Rhino got off the ground. I can't kill it now. If aka takes control of it, this thing could be a massive help. Fu thought. But how do I cut it? I can't break its skin. A broken bar, maybe its insides? But wouldn't that kill it? What can I cut that's squishy, and won't kill it? Wait, that's right. Fu sent out another tendril into Rhino's mouth as he got to his feet, and quickly made a cut in its tongue. I did it. Now give me a piece of you, Fu ordered. Aka quickly tore off a piece of herself and threw it at Fu, who caught it with one of Kyozai's tendrils. Kyozai then shoved the piece of aka against Rhino's tongue. That piece then tunneled into Rhino's tongue, entering his body and starting the assimilation processes. A Rhino groaned as he rampaged around a bit more, breaking things in the area until eventually, it fell to its knees and its eyes turned blue. Once it stopped moving, Fu looked back to aka. Are you controlling it yet? Aka nodded, but she looked perplexed. This thing is not a broken bar normal, its body, its mind, it's all a broken bar. This creature is not human, a broken bar, at least not anymore. Fu was very tempted to ask what that meant, however, they had more pressing matters. We can worry about it later. For now let's go help Ken, Nara, and Shruko with that goblin thing. Slam. Kiba crashed through the wall of one of the empty bedrooms and rolled across the ground until her back hit the opposite wall. Kiba groaned in pain, as she rolled over onto her belly, before pushing herself up. Her clothes were in tatters, covered in slashes, and soaked in blood from the various cuts and gashes in Kiba's body. As Kiba was pulling herself to her feet, Lady Q stepped into the room. Her dress was also very much destroyed, the bottom part of it just completely gone, exposing her long legs, and she had a couple of cuts and bruises on her as well. But most notable was that her fingernails had extended into long thin, needle-like claws that were covered in Kiba's blood. The blood was quickly sucked into the claws, and then all of Lady Q's wounds started to heal, until they vanished completely. Lady Kyokitsuki, quirk, vampiric power. She can extend her nails into long claws, which can absorb blood. Once she's absorbed blood, she can use it to enhance her body, as well as heal herself. So much power. You're even stronger than I am, and you're just a child, the tall woman said, giving her a slightly disappointed look. But you don't know how to use it. That quirkless idiot can't show you how to use your power. Don't call him that, Kiba roared. At this point, she was so mad, she could barely feel the pain, as she forced herself to her legs. Oh please darling, can't you see? That thing has no right to exist, a weakling who hides behind children, Lady Q said, disgust and contempt dripping from her voice. I am far, far superior to him. Shut up, shut up, shut up, Kiba screamed, breathing heavily, not because of her wounds, but because of the sheer rage coursing through her. Her body felt like it was on fire, and her mind was getting cloudier by the second. Her rage was so overwhelming that she clutched her now aching head. You know I'm right. She smiled confidently at Kiba. If you really wanted to defend him, you would have gone all out at the beginning of the battle and killed me. But you didn't. You know you want to be with me. Kill, Kiba grunted, that word sticking with her, and embedding itself into her mind. That's right, we are the powerful. We take what we want, and kill those weaklings who stand against us. Lady Q preached. Kill, 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 kill. Kiba's repeated over and over again, as suddenly it was all she could focus on. And then her body started to change. Her hair began to turn red, starting from her roots, going all the way to her tips. The whites of her eyes and her fingernails joined in, turning crimson red, and her fingernails extended as well, becoming even more claw-like. Her veins popped out, almost glowing red, and her muscles seemed to increase in size slightly, as her fangs extended. While this transformation was happening, Lady Q looked on in shock. What is this? Kill, 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 kill. Kiba roared, her voice now carrying an animalistic rage, and just looking at her, Lady Q could see only a rage-filled demon. And then with strength, Unlike anything Kiba had shown before, she lunged at the woman, intent on ending her life. Chapter 126, Under Attack Part 3, Netsu hit the ground, landing in a classroom after the floor had collapsed. Ow! He pulled himself up and looked around. Yami, where'd you go? Unfortunately, Yami had landed in a different room, meaning Netsu was on his own, but not for much longer. As soon, one of the Gamis ran into the room, having landed nearby. Immediately, Netsu reacted, doing what Yami had suggested, and increasing the power of his flames severalfold. Firewall. Netsu's body exploded with blue fire, the floor burned underneath him, the desks melted around him, and the chairs caught on fire just being near him. Gami backed up a bit, not knowing if their quirk would protect them from the now much hotter flames. Looks like Yami was right, just had to increase the temperature. Netsu smirked, now confident in his ability to fight against Gami. He formed a fireball in his hand. So, ready to get scorched? I don't know. Ready to kill your own sister? Gami asked coldly. Netsu's eyes widened. What? Remember, one of us is just your sister. And right now, we both are exactly identical, and we stay identical. Gami explained, meaning if one of us gets hurt, we both do. In other words, attack me, and you'll be setting that girl on fire. Yeah, broken bar, that a broken bar, you jerk. Netsu shouted at them in rage, his fire's ferocity increasing ever so slightly more. I can't attack you like this, and you can't attack me, Gami surmised. However, my quirk's effects will wear off in a few minutes. But you can't keep this fire up forever, or else you won't be able to breathe. I wonder if you can last? Grrrr. Netsu grit his teeth in anger and frustration, balling his fist up, trying to keep his cool and not literally explode. Hey, I have to keep this up, just for a bit longer. Don't worry. I'll save you. Yami meanwhile, had landed in the library, his cloak softening his fall as he landed on one of the tables, but first, smashing through it. Glad I always wear a cloak. Hey, Yami thought as he picked himself off the ground and onto his feet. He looked around for Netsu, but couldn't find him. His search was interrupted by the sound of footsteps running towards the library. By the time Yami turned his head towards the entrance, Gami was already walking through the door. Yami reacted immediately, spitting out more grim batter that quickly turned into more Ravagers. This again? Gami asked as he tried jumping at Yami, trying to ignore the Ravagers, but very quickly he was dragged down by the swarm of Ravagers. Oh, I am so glad I can't annoyance right now. Yami kept vomiting up more Ravagers, until the room was pretty much full of them, completely obscuring Gami's vision, and Yami's. Normally Yami would have been able to see someone even with a massive swarm of Ravagers blocking his view, via tracking their emotions. However, Gami had no emotions. None. Literally, none. Not even the small amount Fu still had. Gami felt absolutely nothing. He must have killed emotions. Yami speculated, before shaking his head. Doesn't matter, just need wait. Gami told them his quirk wore off in just a few minutes. Now it was a matter of staying away from his scythe. Back outside, Tamura was watching his Namu fight. Nemesis was currently dealing with a massive amount of Grim. Half of the fodder villains he'd brought along had already fallen to them. It was needed to fend off the seemingly never-ended Grim reinforcements. Hood on the other hand crash. The wyvern hit the ground. Multiple pieces of its body were destroyed, and many of its bony parts were broken. As the wyvern started to fade away, Tamura smiled. Finally, now I can have Hood help Ruin. Currently, Ruin and All Might were still going at it, although the fight was a bit farther away from everyone else. All Might still couldn't do much damage to Ruin. But Ruin wasn't doing much damage either, as All Might used his skills and experience to keep the mindless doll from landing any serious hits. Hood got killed before Shigaraki could finish his order. The ground suddenly started to shake. It was then that Kai flew through the roof of his room and into the air, his massive figure nearly eclipsing the entire battleground. "Who's hurting my family?" Kai bellowed as loud as he could, nearly blowing out the ears of many of those fighting below. His three heads all showing different emotions. His left head was showing concern, looking around for Izuku and his siblings, and his middle head showed anger, glaring down at the villains. Lastly, his right head was crying, "Shit, Somehow I forgot about him. Shigaraki grunted in annoyance. Hood, subdue him, or kill him if you need to. I don't really care. Hood, still in the sky, rocketed towards Kai at high speeds, and before Kai could even react, Hood did another extended arm punch, hitting his middle head on his forehead. The middle head roared, as he threw it back in pain, while he used his other head to try and bite Hood. This failed miserably as Hood easily dodged both heads, before smacking them both with its extended limbs. Kai roared in pain. His voice once again resonated throughout the battlefield. So annoying. Shigaraki sighed. Master, I have returned. Kurogiri appeared beside Shigaraki. I finished deploying the last of our forces throughout the forest. Part of their plan included leaving squads of villains throughout the forest, to fight off the Grimm. It would keep the Grimm from swarming on them too much, and keep Shigaraki from having to actually fight an army himself. Kaboom! Ga! Shigaraki and Kurogiri turned their attention to Sai and Konashi's fight. Sai had managed to get some distance on Konashi and was pounding the area around her with explosive swords. Ga! Konashi shouted as she raised her sword, unleashing more bolts of red energy to destroy all the swords being shot at her. But this just caused them to explode, the explosion engulfing Konashi within it. When the explosion died down and the dust cleared, Konashi was on one knee, looking very much worse for wear. She was covered in burns and soot, her skin was bruised and bloody, and she was breathing heavily. HMPH. This fight is over, Sai said, before opening a bunch of portals in front of her, and shooting out blunt swords, to smack her right in the face. Konashi tried to get up, but her knees were too weak, and she collapsed back onto one knee. As the swords got closer and closer, and then, Kurogiri opened up a portal in front of her, snatching up the swords, before spitting them out of a portal behind Sai. Sai created portals behind her and deflected those swords, and both she and Konashi glared at Kurogiri. Stay out of this, Konashi shouted at Kurogiri. This is between me and my father. The League of Villains does not care about your family situation, Kurogiri told her. You are losing, and that could affect the tide of battle. As such, I have stepped in, to ensure our victory. If you do not wish for me to be involved, show me that my assistance is unnecessary. TCH. Konashi stood up. Fine, not like I have a choice. Sai looked at her two opponents, trying not to look as nervous as she felt. Things aren't looking good. At this rate, I don't think our side can win this. I just have to hold out hope for reinforcements. Meanwhile, the goblin fight had been taken into the backyard, after Ken and Shuraku managed to tackle him through the house. Rah! The goblin roared, as Ken and Shuraku tackled it to the ground. Keep it pinned, Shuraku ordered as she jumped back, while Ken tried to keep the monster pinned, struggling to keep it down as the monster proved to be a bit stronger than him. Fortunately, he wouldn't have to do it for long, as Shuraku proceeded to shoot out a bunch of webs at the beast, keeping it stuck to the ground with many coats of her webbing, and making sure to web down its arms and legs. Alright, great job Shuraku. Ken praised his teammate, as he smirked and cracked his knuckles, getting ready to lay down a beating on the Namu. Wham, 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 wham. Ken proceeded to punch the Namu with all four of his arms, letting loose a barrage of punches, unleashing over a dozen every few seconds. Shuraku joined in, leaping over to the opposite side, and unleashing numerous blows to the monster's face, creating quite a few bruises. Rat rat rat. The goblin roared before suddenly its body exploded into flames. Ah, hunt, hunt, Ken shouted as he and Shuraku jumped away from the goblin, their hands now slightly burned from the fire. Oh number. Shuraku stared at the flaming Namu in horror and saw her webs starting to burn away. Soon the goblin broke out of the webs, its body still on fire, and if that wasn't bad enough, they also saw the bruises on its body quickly heal, until goblin was good as new. Shuraku and Ken looked at the monster in fear, their eyes widened as both of them were now at a bit of a loss on how to fight this thing. While they were stunned, the goblin looked at them, before spitting out a massive fireball, headed straight towards them, before it could hit them. However, a massive crystal wall popped out of the ground, shielding them from the fireball, which exploded against the crystal, cracking it slightly. Finally caught up to you two. Ken and Shuraku looked behind them and saw Naru running up towards them, "Sis, for once I'm glad to see you," Ken said as the goblin continued to shoot fireballs at the shield. "Same." Nara nodded. "What's the situation? Do you know what this guy's quirk is?" "No, but from what we know, he's stronger than Ken. Can set himself on fire, as well as shoot it, and he regenerates," Shraku explained as quickly as she could. Suddenly the goblin jumped over the shield, leaping into the air intent on stomping down on them. Ken and Shraku ran, with Nara walking backwards slowly, as she aimed her arm upwards, before shooting out a bunch of small sharp crystals. This did very little. Most of the crystals just bounced off its skin, some of them made small cuts, but those almost immediately regenerated. Slam! The goblin crashed into the ground, causing it to shake, and for Nara to lose her balance, and fall on her back. Nara grunted, quickly trying to get up, but the goblin swiftly stamped its foot down on her chest, slamming her back down into the ground, creating a small crater. "Get off her!" Ken screamed as he rushed towards the goblin, and tackled it off of his sister. Ugh! Ken grits his teeth, the pain from grabbing the on-fire goblin hitting him each second, but he had to endure. As Ken pushed the goblin dug its feet into the ground, slowing Ken down, before the goblin grabbed Ken's head, looked down at him, and unleashed a flamethrower attack right at his face. Ken screamed in pain, trying to move away from the goblin, but the goblin grabbed his arm, keeping him in place. Whip! Shraku shot another web at the goblin, this time at the back of his head. This got the goblin's attention, and it stopped attacking Ken, to turn its head to look at Shraku. "Let him go, monster!" Shraku shouted at the goblin, fear brimming in all 5 of her eyes, her 6 legs shaking. The goblin threw Ken to the ground and started running at Shraku. Shraku then turned the other way and ran. The goblin chased after her, the two running all the way over to the pool. Shraku then leaped into the air, the goblin jumping after her. Then Shraku shot out a web line at the goblin's chest, and before the fire could melt it off, she grabbed the web line and used it to slam the goblin into the pool. Splash! The goblin and Shraku, as she was connected to him via the web line, were slammed into the bottom of the pool. Quickly, the goblin's flames went out, although the water around him did start to heat up. Quickly. "Alright, now that the fire is out, I just need to..." Shraku's train of thought was cut off when she noticed the water around her getting very, very warm. Very, very quickly. Shiz! Shraku's eyes widened, as the water around her started to boil, and started getting uncomfortable to be in. She looked at Goblin, who while still not on fire, was now glowing, seemingly increasing the heat its quirk gave off, trying to light itself back on fire. Shraku realized quickly that her plan was not going to work, and decided to retreat. Immediately, she jumped out of the pool, which was now starting to bubble and emit steam. "What's going on?" Nara asked, her brother's arm slung around her hard diamond-like shoulder. As Ken was so weak she had to help him walk. "It's boiling the pool," Shraku answered simply, not taking her eyes off the pool. Soon the pool began to bubble and steam more, and more, until soon all that became visible was steam. Shraku, Ken, and Nara all stared at what was now a pit of steam. And when the steam started to part, they saw the goblin, on fire, standing in the now empty pool. "Aw, shit!" Ken cursed weakly. Crash! The goblin leapt out of the pool, jumping over the 3 kids, before landing a few yards behind them. The goblin roared, as it charged toward all 3 of them. Nara was ready to set up another diamond shield wall when suddenly, the space in front of them began to ripple. "Huh?" Nara paused, wondering what was happening, and then the goblin ran into the ripple and vanished. And Mew rolled out, and the ripple vanished. "Mew!" Nara gasped, surprised to see the elusive boy now of all times. Mew didn't respond. Instead, he was hunched over on his knees, completely silent. The 3 went over to him, and their eyes widened when saw the problem. In order to create the portal for Goblin to enter, Mew had gotten far too close to the flaming Namu, burning his hand, very, very badly, to the point where it almost didn't resemble a hand anymore. Mew was currently trying to hold back a scream of pain, while tears poured from his eyes. "Oh my gosh!" Shraku went over to him and inspected his hand, but she knew there was nothing she could do about it. Thud, 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 thud. All the kids heard the sound of very heavy footsteps coming toward them. "Oh, what now?" Nara asked, ready to fight whatever was coming at them. However, what they saw was Fu, Sanson, and aka, riding on top of Rhino, who was running toward them. "Guys, Fu said once they got close enough to see Mew's messed up hand. Sanson made over-exaggerated wide eyes, and aka just stared at Mew. "We couldn't handle the goblin thing on our own, so Mew had to create a portal to defeat it," Shraku explained curtly. "We need to get him to Izuku now." "Right." Fu created some tendrils and got ready to grab Mew, but he was interrupted. Crash! Suddenly, Lady Q went flying out of the house's third floor and landed a few yards away from the kids, who could only stare in disbelief at the state she was in. Her clothes were almost completely torn off, she had a massive claw mark on her torso, and both her arms had been ripped off, as was one of her legs. While all the other children were staring on in shock, Fu was staring in confusion, having quickly gotten over his shock. That was the woman Kiba was fighting, but why is she so torn up? That doesn't make any sense. Kiba would never. Fu's thoughts were cut off when suddenly, he heard something slam down behind them. All the kids looked to see what it was, and they saw Kiba, with her head pointed down, in her new transformation, having jumped out of the hole Lady Q made to follow her prey. "Kiba?" Shraku asked, sounding unsure despite the fact that this was obviously Kiba. But she seemed so broken bar different that Shraku was once again in shock. Kiba raised up her head, revealing her reddened, infuriated eyes, and her monstrous fangs. Kill. Chapter 127, Under Attack Part 4. Kiba lunged at Lady Q, moving so fast that she looked like a blur, rushing past the other kids, and onto Lady Q. The enraged vampire girl raised her arm up and aimed it right at Lady Q's heart, but before she could land a killing blow on her unconscious prey, she was grabbed by one of Kyozai's tendrils, and thrown far away into the air. Fu then grabbed Lady Q and brought her to them, before looking at the others. "What the hell happened to Kiba?" Ken asked, his eyes still wide in shock at having seen Kiba move so quickly. "I don't know, I've never seen her like this," Fu told them, before shaking his head. "But whatever this is, Kiba doesn't seem like she's in control of herself. We have to calm her down." Kill. Thud. Everyone looked behind them, to see that Kiba had already returned from wherever Fu had thrown her. Before Kiba could move, Nara kneeled down and raised up a bunch of crystals around Kiba. This held her for all of 1 second, as Kiba immediately rushed through the crystal barrier, right at them. Sanson rushed forward and wrapped her body around Kiba, to try and slow her down, but Kiba literally went right through her, tearing a hole in Sanson's body as she continued on her path towards Lady Q. She reached the half-dead villain, but before she could attack, Rhino kicked her away, sending Kiba flying back. Kiba rolled through the air, sailing a few inches above the ground, before digging her fingers into the ground, and slowing herself, before she lunged back at the group. Rhino charged forward, but Kiba just rushed past its legs, knocking it onto its face. As she continued to go after Lady Q, Fu sent out more of Kyozai's tendrils and tried to hold Kiba down for a second, but she was too strong, and just kept moving towards Lady Q. Ken pushed himself away from his sister, and punched the ground as hard as he could, breaking it up, and causing Kiba to trip, but Kiba then just started crawling towards them, like a feral animal. Slam. That's when Sanson came back, having turned herself into a massive hammer, stretching high into the sky, before coming down on Kiba, with such great force it cratered the ground around them. But Kiba just jumped through Sanson's hammer, launching herself extremely high up in the air. Kiba aimed herself at Lady Q, and fell back to the ground. Nara tried shooting more crystal shards at her, but they did absolutely nothing, breaking instantly when they hit her skin. As Kiba got closer, Ken jumped up, past Kiba, and then grabbed her leg, before bringing her down, and slamming her body into the ground as hard as he could, breaking apart the brickwork and causing dirt to fly up. This evidently did no damage to Kiba whatsoever, and she immediately yanked her foot out of Ken's hand. She then proceeded to turn around, lunge at Ken, and punch him dead center in the chest. Shoom. The punch Kiba gave was so strong that it created a gust of wind around it, and everyone could hear Ken's bones break as he flew back. Crash. Ken smashed through the side of the house, landing in the inside sports room, unconscious on his back, and in a flash of green Ken returned to his normal form, blood spilling from his mouth. "Ken!" Nara screamed out in horror, but before she could run over to her brother, Kiba charged once again. Shuraku tried to shoot webs at her, but Kiba was too fast and all of her shots missed. Fu and Sansan sent out as many tendrils as they could, creating a wall to try and grab onto Kiba and slow her down. This did barely anything, as Kiba rushed through them, only slowing down by a tiny sliver before making it to Fu, who was standing in front of Lady Q. And Kiba moved through him, splatting Fu's body all across the floor. Once again, Kiba was in front of Lady Q, but before she could reach her, Rhino charged in, and grabbed her, scooping her up and running a few yards away, before planting her on his chest, and falling on top of her. "Just stay down already. Murder is more trouble than it's worth," aka shouted at Kiba. "You've already tortured her well enough, so calm yourself." Kiba, evidently, did not calm herself, as she proceeded to kick Rhino off of her, sending the Namu, who weighed several tons, flying into the air, before crashing down a few yards away onto his back. As Kiba was getting up, Nara stood in front of Lady Q and unleashed a wave of massive crystals at her, to try and push her back. "Kill!" Kiba screamed before she rushed forward, punching through each of the crystals at a terrifying pace, reaching Nara. Kiba then punched a massive hole through her chest, and leapt through it. Nara didn't even have time to feel shocked before she was engulfed in pink light, and transformed into Wild Vine. The hole in her chest quickly healed, and then Nara collapsed, and in another flash, she was back in her human form, unconscious and pale. Kiba meanwhile, was now once again, closing in on Lady Q, her fangs bared and ready to rip the woman's head off, and then, she went limp. Kiba's body landed limply onto Lady Q, her hair began to fade back into white, her nails receded back to normal, and turned back into their normal colors, her muscles shrank and her veins receded, as did her fangs. Lastly, the red cleared from the whites of her eyes, before they closed, leaving her unconscious. She passed out, aka said as she ran over to Kiba, taking a closer look at her unconscious body, along with Sansan. "Is it just me, or does she look a broken bar slightly too pale?" "It's not just you." Fu came over, having grown back everything but his legs, and was using Kyozai's tendrils to keep him up. "Her blood tanks are low, dangerously low." Fu then ripped off one of his arms, held it over Kiba's mouth, and let the blood flow into her. "My guess is that whatever this new form was, it used up all the blood Kiba had stored up, way faster than usual, to make her more powerful." "Theo's waiter, we have to save Evione," Sansan said, grabbing a hold of Nara, who had passed out from the pain by now, and Nara. "You're right, Fu, grab Kiba and the villain, we need to get them to Izuku." Shuraku told them, "I'm not sure how he can help, but it's the best we can do." Back with Yami and Gami. Gami had killed at least a couple hundred Ravagers, but Yami would just keep filling the room back up, every time the number of Ravagers started getting too low. Yami himself was currently hiding behind a bookshelf, patiently waiting for the 9 minutes to be up. "Well, it looks like you've done it," Gami said as it got closer and closer to being 9 minutes. "You guys really are strong, huh? When time is up, you be weak, Ravagers tear you apart, surrender," Yami told him. Gami smiled. "Very well then." Then Gami turned his scythe arm back into a normal arm and raised both his arms up to surrender. Yami peeked his head out from the shelf, parting the swarm of Ravagers slightly, so he could see that Gami had properly surrendered. Once he confirmed this, Yami ran out from behind the shelf, parted the Ravagers further, and then shot out one of the liquor's tongues at Gami. The tongue wrapped around Gami's body, restraining him completely. As Yami went up to Gami, he saw that Gami was still smiling. "Why smile? You lost?" Yami asked, very confused as to Gami's attitude. And then, Gami started to change. Their body morphed a bit, not too much, but he became more feminine. Their features softened, and they became a bit slimmer. Yami also immediately noticed an explosion of emotions within them, as the smirk on Gami's face vanished, and was replaced with a look of nervous fear. "Oh, this is always so unpleasant." Gami cringed, their voice sounding way more feminine than before. Gami then turned their attention back to Yami. Yuma broken bar high? Yami raised an eyebrow. Explain. Meanwhile, Netsu and his Gami were still staring at each other, neither able to attack. Netsu was nearly hyperventilating, struggling to breathe as he burned more and more oxygen. Gami suddenly smirked. Well, it looks like you made it. Congratulations. Huh? Netsu gave him a confused look, very weirded out by his enemy congratulating him. But then, Gami's body started to change. Snakes grew out of their head, their face became less pale, their body less masculine, and clothes began to appear over them until Kad finally returned. Oh, Yuka groaned, falling onto her knees, clutching her head. Meanwhile, Netsu finally was able to let down his firewall and rushed out of the room trying to get some more air. It stayed like this for a while, clutching her head, while Netsu was catching his breath in the hallway. Eventually, K's headache died down enough for her to pull herself onto her feet. Netsu, I have something really important to tell Dad, but we need to go now before I forget. Oh okay, Netsu said, still trying to catch his breath. Not too much later, Fu and his group met with Netsu, Yami, K, and Gami, who was trying to cover up her naked body, who was no longer bounded, and standing right beside them, much to the surprise of Fu's group, who stopped cautiously a few feet away from them. What happened? Gasped, when she saw Nara, Ken, Mew, Kiba, and Lady Q. It's a long story, Fu told them, before looking over at Gami, who blushed and hid behind K. What's with them? They're on our side, told them firmly, much to the other side's confusion. Just trust me. Yami nodded, confirming that he believed her. Then, the door opened up, with Izuku on the other side. Come quickly. All the kids flooded in, and Izuku quickly closed the door behind them. What's he doing here? Fuku gasped, pointing at Gami. And why are they a girl now? You a broken bar. I'm actually a girl. I just turned myself into a boy for Yuma broken bar. Well, it's complicated, Gami explained, her face very red. Please call me Shina when I'm in this state. It's nice to meet you all. The room was silent, all of the kids except Fu, Yami, and Netsu glaring at her, making Shina shrink behind once again. Everyone, we can focus on that later, Izuku told them firmly. Please set down all the injured ones in front of me. Fu nodded, and his group set down Ken, Nara, Mew, Kiba, and Lady Q. Kiba, Mew. Fuku went over to look at her two friends unconscious and injured-bodied, tears spilling from her eyes. Why a broken bar? Izuku first looked over Lady Q, as her injuries were the worst, by far. Honestly, it's a miracle this woman is still alive. If it weren't for her quirk desperately trying to keep her alive, she'd already be dead. Netsu, can you come over here and burn her injuries? It'll cauterize the wounds. I'm not sure if it'll save her. Boot to broken bar. It's the best we can do right now. Right. Netsu agreed, his head still aching from oxygen deprivation, but he did as he was told, heading over to Lady Q, and burning her wounds shut. While he did that, Izuku went over to Kiba and looked over her. She's gonna be okay, right? Fuku asked Izuku. Her tone had more denial in it than it did hope. She won't die, but she's not gonna be waking up for a while, Izuku told her, his own voice sounding stern and serious, as he pushed back their overwhelming amount of anger and sadness, to better handle the situation. Whatever that form she entered was, it took a toll on her, not to mention all the wounds this woman inflicted on her. Damn villain, aka cursed. Wait, you saw her in that form? Shraku asked, confused as to how Izuku knew about Kiba's transformation despite having been in this room the whole time. Izuku nodded. I saw everything using the cameras and the stairs. Well, not everything. I still don't know the situation with Shina, but we can get to that later. For now, Netsu, please seal her wounds shut as well. Netsu nodded, finishing up with Q before going on to Kiba, and burning the gashes in her body. Izuku then moved on to Nara. She looks okay. She's just exhausted. My guess is that when Kiba made a hole in her chest. Kiba did what? Netsu asked. In pure shock. Kiba punched a hole in her chest, but my guess is that Nara's quirk reacted, forcefully transforming her into Wild Vine to repair the damage before she died, Izuku theorized. But switching from transformation to transformation must a toll on her. There's nothing we can do right now, other than giving her some time to rest and get her to a hospital as soon as this is over. Izuku then moved on to Ken, whose breathing was labored. Blood was still coming out of his mouth, and his face was still heavily burned from the goblin's fire breath. As for Ken, I'm not sure exactly, but Kiba likely broke a few of his ribs. He might even be bleeding internally. And the burns. Damn it, he needs immediate medical attention, but there's no way to get him out of here in time. Damn me, I should have hired a nurse by now. Then, he looked over at Miu, and Miu, most of his hand is gone, a broken bar, damn it. While Izuku was looking over the injured, Eri just stood in the back, watching, her fist tightening more and more with each person. Izuku assessed. Maybe I can turn Ken to stone, so he'll be frozen until we can get him to a hospital, suggested. That might work, but we'll have to get his eyes open, Izuku said. I'm so sorry, Shina said, causing everyone to look over at her, as she hung her head in shame. I could have stopped all of this from happening if only I'd killed my stupidity. There was a short pause after that before Izuku got up, and walked towards her, moving aside gently, and then kneeling down to look at her face to face. I would like you to explain yourself, please. Yeah, broken bar, okay. Shina took a deep breath, before looking back up at Izuku nervously. My name is Shina, and I work for the MLA, the Meta Liberation Army. Or at least I was forced to. What's a Meta Liberation Army? Asked curiously. It was a large group of people, who believed that quirks should dominate society. They believed that quirks should be free to use as people pleased. And many people within that group were quirk supremacists, who believed that a person's quirk should dictate their role in society. Izuku explained. Some even believed that people with villainous quirks or the quirkless should be killed, for the sake of ensuring their genes don't pass on to others. They were supposed to have been destroyed a long time ago, but it's fully possible that someone else brought it back. And if that's the case, it would explain who's been trying to kill me for all this time. So these are the same people that sent knives, and that gunman, Fu concluded. Shina nodded. They've really wanted you dead a while. The thought of quirkless having power over people with powerful quirks, or having power at all, makes them really, really angry. So it's an army of quirkist scum, aka SBAT, TCH. When I get my hands on them I swear they will regret what they've done. My parents were a part of the MLA and forced me to be too. Shina continued her explanation, with a saddened look on her face. When my quirk came in, more powerful members took interest in me, and they wanted me to a broken bar to take people's lives. Once again, Izuku fought the rising feelings of anger, sadness, and utter disgust. Right now he needed to hear Shina's explanation out, all the way through, as quickly as possible. I didn't want to do it. I couldn't do it. Just a broken bar. Taking a life makes me sick, Shina admitted, her face going slightly green as she was no doubt thinking about the people she was forced to kill. But then, they made me broken bar become Gami. They told me to kill my emotions, my ethics, and my gender. I think that last one was just because they wanted a boy, but they made me do it anyway. And so, after I do all that, I can a broken bar I can take a life. But you still feel the disgust, after you turn back, Izuku said. Shina nodded, looking away from Izuku, so he couldn't see the guilt in her eyes. I wanted to stop, but they wouldn't let me. They said that this was all for my sake, that I was creating a better world for people like me. But they're just liars. They just want a better world for themselves. Yeah, broken bar. I've been looking for a way out for a long time now. And when I heard about this place I knew that this was my chance. You're taking in strong kids with no parents. And my parents are dead to me, so broken bar, I thought a broken bar, if I helped you, you'd take me in and protect me from the MLA. Then why did you attack us? Fu asked, crossing his arm and giving her a confused look. Shina looked down again. Well, a broken bar when I'm Gami. Sometimes I don't do things I normally would. I saw all the powerful forces on the villain's side, and Gami decided that I needed to test you to see if you could actually win this. Because I betrayed them and we lost a broken bar, I can't imagine what the consequences would be, Izuku said, finishing her sentence, before putting an arm on her shoulder. It's okay. I get it. You weren't yourself. or rather you were forced to become something that's not yourself. I can't blame you any more than I can blame Kiba for going berserk, but I could have done something. Even if I just remembered to kill my own stupidity, I could have realized that I was making our side weaker, Sheena said tearfully, rubbing her skull-like eyes to get rid of the tears. I'm so stupid. Speaking of our side, we need to go back out there, Fu said. Izuku turned around to face Fu and was about to open his mouth when Fu sent one of Kyozai's tendrils out and grabbed the seer that was in the room. Show us what's happening outside. The seer did as instructed, and everyone crowded around it to see. Sai was struggling against the combined force of Kurogiri and Konashi. Konashi unleashed a bolt of energy at Sai, who dodged it, only for Kurogiri to open a portal behind her, and then above her, consuming the energy bolt, and transferring it so it struck Sai. Sai screamed in pain, as the energy hit her. Meanwhile, Aizawa looked exhausted, breathing heavily, as Weaver approached him with a grin. You all popped out, mister? Weaver giggled. Why don't I help you take a nap? Kai was currently fighting Hood, and getting beat to hell, his body covered in bruises, and many of his scales having been knocked off him, as Hood flew around him at overwhelming speeds, and smacked him repeatedly. Sori was currently on the defensive for once, as she leaped forward to avoid Hit, attacking her from behind, only for Hit to show up behind her again, as soon as she landed, once again trying to attack her, but Sori barely managed to dodge, by dashing to the side, this time Hit not following. It seems Sori had finally gotten some grasp of Hit's quirk, but she was also covered in bruises, and blood was leaking from her mouth, while Hit didn't have a scratch on him, so the battle was still very much in his favor. Lastly, All Might and Ruin were charging at each other, but Janba's arms grabbed All Might's arms, and held him back, taking All Might by surprise, and allowing Ruin to get in a blow to the face. All Might yelled as blood sprayed from his mouth and nose. The hit sent him flying to the side. That thing beat the hound, Yami noted. Kai's getting beat up by that flying hooded thing, cried. Even All Might's struggling, Netsu said, shocked to see the #1 hero on the back foot. Now show us 1A, Fu ordered. The seer changed the image to show 1A fighting the former Yakuza members in the entry hall. Kirishima, Tsu, and Okako were fighting against Rappa. Okako tried to attack him from above, but Rappa unleashed a flurry of punches above his head, and sent Okako flying into the ceiling. Meanwhile, Kirishima and Tsu came at him from the front and from behind, but Rappa just punched them both back. Todoroki, Tokoyami, Mineta, and Ida were currently facing off against Rukia. Todoroki sent out a wave of ice at the massive villain, but he just punched through it all, and Todoroki had to move back with his eyes to avoid Rukia's fist slamming him into the ground. Dark Shadow charged at him, but Rukia just backhanded it away, before raising his hand up to his face, to block some balls that Mineta was throwing at him from above. Rukia tore a chunk out of the wall and threw it at Mineta, but Ida managed to get him out of the way before it hit him. Ojiro and Aoyama were fighting Kaoru and Stasis, Ojiro jumping around to avoid Chrono's hair attacks, while Aoyama took pot shots at Chrono, but the villain easily dodged Aoyama's attacks. Meanwhile, Sao, Shoji, and Sero were trying to fight off against Setsuno, Tabe, and Hojo. Shoji made multiple arms and unleashed them to try and hit Setsuno, but Hojo jumped in front of him, defending his friend with his crystal-covered arms, nullifying Shoji's attack, before Tabe came in, and started devouring Shoji's arm, running towards the multi-limbed boy, as he ate up his arms. Sero tried to shoot tape at Tabe, but Setsuno stole the tape out of his arm. Tabe got closer and closer to Shoji, his maw threatening to bite into the boy's chest, but then Sato came in, and punched Tabe back. And while all this was going on, Momo and Jiro were on the side, Jiro having had her support items stolen by Setsuno, so she was helping Momo tend to the wounded. Koda, Mina, Kaminari, and Taru. Izuku could clearly see that things weren't going well. At this rate, if nothing changed then their side would lose. Dad, I know you want to keep us safe, but if they go down, then we're screwed, Fu told him. Those doors won't be able to protect us, not when they have someone who can open portals as he pleases. We need to help them win. It's our only hope. Izuku knew he was right, but he couldn't help but argue. But you're all weakened. Ken, Nara, Kiba, and Mew are all out of commission. Netsu is still recovering from oxygen deprivation. You've used up a good amount of your meat storage. Shiraku's exhausted. The only ones who are still in good shape are Sansan, aka Yami, and Sheena. I know, Buta Broken Bar, we don't have a choice, Fu reiterated. Sniff. I'm sorry. Suddenly, everyone turned their attention to Eri at the back of the room, who was now crying tears of frustration and self-loathing. If I could just control my quirk, Eri sobbed. I could fix this. I'm sorry. Immediately, Izuku, Fuku, and Kyaku all went over and hugged Eri. It's okay, Izuku told her. You've been trying your best to get control over your quirk. We know you have. It's not your fault. I wish I had a quirk, so that way I could defend you all and not just sit on the side. I'm sorry. Actually, Sheena spoke up, getting everyone's attention. I can help with both of those problems. Author's notes. Okay, let's get this out of the way. Yes, Janeba defeated the Hound off-screen. Janeba was made to help kill All Might, so the fact that the Hound was able to hold him off so long is impressive. Chapter 128, Under Attack Part 5. Aoyama had many regrets. He regretted complaining to his parents so much about his quirklessness. He regretted telling All for One about how long they were staying at the Midoriya Foundation, and right now he regretted not getting farther away from Chronostasis. Everything slowed for Aoyama. Ojiro had been hit by the villain's quirk and was slowed down for real, and now, Chrono's hair arrow was headed to impale his face. Aoyama was falling backward. He couldn't dodge. This was it. He was going to die. Perhaps this is for the best. Aoyama thought, as his impending doom got closer and closer. With this, the UA traitor dies, an unglamorous, bloody death. It's what I deserve. Just please, someone save the others. They don't deserve my fate. Chrono's arrow came inches towards Aoyama's face, and then, something pushed him to the left. Aoyama hit the side of the second floor guardrail, and was on the ground, as Chrono's arrow missed him completely. What? Chrono shouted in confusion, as he recalled his hair. Chronostasis. Everyone looked down the hall and saw Izuku walking toward them. I think you've done enough, Izuku said, glaring harshly at Chrono. Boom. Suddenly Izuku shot toward Chrono at unreal speeds, closing the distance between him and Chrono in less than a second, and punching him in the gut. Chrono groaned, as the force of Izuku's punch winded him. Aftershock, Izuku said. Shoom. Chrono went flying off of Izuku's fist, and into the opposite wall. What? Chrono grunted, as he pulled himself out of the wall, and onto his feet, clutching his gut as he tried to process what just happened. How did you? It's my new quirk, Izuku explained, casually walking up to Chrono. It's called Repel. It allows me to repel myself away from things, or repel things away from me. That includes the air, by the way, which is how I did that little dash, and that punch was for Riri. Shoom. Izuku repelled himself off of the air behind him, and dashed right over to Chrono in the blink of an eye, and so are these. Piston onslaught. The green teen then unleashed a flurry of blows to Chrono's face, stomach and chest. With each punch, he repelled his elbows against the air, thrusting his arm forward into Chrono, before repelling it off of Chrono, to quickly repeat the process, allowing Izuku to unleash over 30 punches in the span of 3 seconds. Chrono, now heavily bruised and very dazed, could only try and thrust his arrow hair at Izuku, but Izuku repelled it away from him, causing it to fly around Izuku's head. Izuku then grabbed Chrono, spun him to the opposite side of him, and then kicked him, repelling Chrono's body away from his foot, causing him to fly forward, and fall on his face. Honestly, I'd like to keep hitting you as payback for Riri, but I need to get some payback for my other kids as well. Izuku walked over to Chrono menacingly. You better prepare yourself, because this is going to hurt. Gah! Kirishima cried out in pain, blood flying from his mouth, as he was sent flying back from another one of Rappa's assaults. The red-clad hero in training collapsed onto the ground, falling unconscious as he bled all over the floor. Is that it? Rappa asked as both Tsu and Okako stood in front of him. Both of them were badly bloodied and bruised, but still standing to fight. I was told I was gonna get a good fight, but this is light work. Tsu looked back at Kirishima's unconscious form, before giving Okuko an apologetic look. I have to get him to Momo. He's gonna die if he stays on the battlefield. Okuko trembled for a moment. She knew what that meant. That she'd have to fight this monster alone. Okay, just be careful. Don't let anyone hit you on your way there, right, Karo? Tsu croaked, before grabbing Kirishima with her tongue and leaping away, leaving Okuko alone, to stand off against Rappa. Come on girlie, show me some real power, Rappa urged her, as he walked up to her, ready to unleash another flurry of blows. You want power? Okuko grit her teeth, both out of anger, and to prepare herself for the pain that was about to come, as she powered up One for All to 100%, focusing it in her right arm. I'll give you power. Okuko reeled her arm back, and Rappa charged forward, both of them ready to unleash devastating attacks, until Kiba flew in and kicked Rappa in the head. Gah! Rappa, completely taken off guard, was launched to the left, through one of the walls. Kiba flipped through the air, before landing on her feet. The Queen of Eternal Darkness has returned, to send you all to the abyss. Kiba? Okuko shouted out in shock, as she powered down One for All, back into 18% full cowling. What are you? The seers showed us how your fight was progressing, and we saw you all were struggling, so father allowed us to aid you, Kiba explained. What the hell was that? Rappa complained, as he got out of the wall, and walked back towards them, clutching his now aching head. If you're gonna join in the fight, do it the real way. Sneak attacks are for cowards. Snap! Suddenly Kyozai's tendrils sprang out from the floor underneath Rappa, and wrapped around his arms, keeping him from moving. Then I guess I'm a coward, Fu said, as he popped up from behind Rappa. Ladies, if you would. Okuko looked at Kiba, and the two of them smiled, before looking at Rappa. Hey, this ain't a real fight, don't. Rappa didn't get a chance to finish his sentence, as both Kiba and Okuko rushed forward, and unleashed a flurry of blows on the villain's chest. Shoom! Rappa was sent flying back, once again through another wall, ending up in one of the nearby rooms, completely unconscious. Serves him right, Okuko smirked, happy to have finally taken down one of the Yakuza thugs. Kiba raised her hand towards Okuko, and Okuko high-fived her. Oh, Mineta groaned as he and Ida laid on the ground, completely exhausted. Todoroki and Tokoyami had been thrown to opposite sides, and now Rukia was looking down on Mineta's helpless form. You know, I always wondered if I could squish a person like a bug. Rukia grinned, as he raised his foot up over Mineta. Mineta couldn't move, so much of his vitality had been drained, that he could do was close his eyes, and hope he was taller in his next life. Hey, buzz off! Splat, 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 splat. Suddenly, Ken flew in as Stinkfly, and shot goop right in Rukia's face, covering his eyes in green smelly slime. Ah, shit, Rukia cursed, as he stumbled backward, trying to pull the goop off his face, only to get it stuck to his hands as well. Once Rukia had moved back a few feet, Ken looked up at Netsu, who was flying above them. Now, Netsu aimed down and unleashed a powerful fire blast that engulfed Rukia's massive body completely. When the attack ended, Rukia was on the ground, his body burned, and fire surrounding him, but he was still conscious. Gah, you little! It was then that Nara jumped down from the second floor, in front of Rukia, and let out a massive ice blast, putting out the fires, and freezing Rukia completely, and now he was too weak to break out. Oh, thank God, Mineta cried, literally crying tears of joy. Thank you, I didn't want to die a virgin. Mineta, that is an inappropriate thing to say to children. Ida scolded him. Ken flew down and grabbed Mineta and Ida. Alright, let's get you guys to Eri. It's time for a counterattack. Sato grit his teeth. Currently, he was holding on to an unconscious Shoji and Sero, both of whom had chunks taken out of their arms. He was backed up against a wall, while the trash trio Setsuno, Hojo, and Tabe closed in on him. Alright kid, Setsuno said, before pulling out a gun. Time for you to slash. Suddenly, Shina, who had returned to her Gami form and was thankfully given some of Fuku's clothes, dashed out from nowhere and slashed each of their backs with his scythe. None of the three even had the chance to cry out. Before they all immediately dropped to the floor, Gami stood over the bodies, looking down to make sure his work was done, before looking up at Sato. "Hey, thanks, kid, but I don't think I've seen you around here before," Sato said, squinting at the kid to see if he could recognize them. "I'm new," Gami said simply. "Now let's go, Eri's waiting." These guys aren't breathing," Sato noted nervously, as he looked over the bodies of the trash trio. "That's because they're dead, at least for the next 9 minutes, Gami told him, causing Sato to give him a confused and shocked look. "Now come on, if one of those two bleeds out, there's nothing Eri can do to help them." Chrono grunted, as he barely was able to stand. His body was covered with bruises, his face was swollen, and blood was pouring out of his mouth, nose, and busted chin. "This doesn't make any sense. How did you get a quirk?" Izuku stood in front of him nonchalantly. "Let's just say, you brought on yourself." Speaking of which, the two of them heard footsteps rush towards them, and before Chrono's dazed mind could process what was happened, he was surrounded by the kids except the non-combatant ones, and almost all of 1A, all of whom were completely fine, not a wound on them. They didn't even look exhausted. How Chrono stopped himself, when he quickly realized the answer to his question, and spotted Eri, hiding behind Momo's legs. You ruin everything, you little smash." Before Chrono could finish his sentence, Izuku rushed forward and gave him one last, strong punch to the face, laying him out on the floor, unconscious. "Never speak to my daughter like that again," Izuku said, as he clutched his hand, which hurt slightly due to the force of his punch. "Woo-oo-oo." Yeah, both the class and the kids cheered, at the final former member of the Yakuza getting what he deserved. "Is everyone okay?" Izuku asked, looking around to make sure everyone was fine and accounted for. "It appears so, but we seem to have lost track of Shinso," Momo said, not seeing the sleep-deprived boy anywhere. "Right here," Shinso said, walking out from the hallway, dragging an unconscious Teodoro with him, wrapped up in his capture scarf. "Figured this guy would make the battle harder for everyone, so isolated him." "You took on one of those guys on your own." "That's mainly as hell," Kirishima praised. "Fighting him honestly wasn't that hard, just tedious and nauseating." Shino grimaced. He was too drunk to realize how my quirk worked, or he was too drunk to get himself to stop talking, so he kept triggering my quirk. "Although it seems like you guys had an even easier time, none of you have so much as a scratch." "That'd be thanks to our favorite unicorn," Mina cheered, picking up Eri and hugging her tightly, causing the mono-horn girl to blush heavily. "Yeah, you really saved our asses, guys. Great job," Kaminari said, praising all of the kids. "But, how did you do that dash attack thing on him?" Okako asked Izuku. "And how did Eri suddenly learn how to control her quirk?" "That would be thanks to our newest addition," Izuku said, looking over to Gami who was standing over to the side. "Where did he come from?" Taru asked, not recognizing the boy. "It's a long story," Izuku sighed, not wanting to explain that whole situation. "But this is Gami or Shina, but just for now call them Gami. Their quirk makes it so that when they hit something with their scythe, they can kill that person or any part or aspect of that person, even things like quirklessness and inexperience." "Wait, so he just gave a quirk?" Kaminari shouted in shock. Izuku nodded. "Right. How does it feel?" Shinso asked him curiously. "To finally have one?" Izuku looked down at himself. "Bittersweet, for a lot of reasons, but I'm glad I can finally help fight and protect my children, like a real father should." Okako was about to tell him that even without a quirk he was protecting his children, but Fu spoke up first. "Speaking of fighting, we need to get out there and help," Fu said sternly. Izuku nodded. "We saw what was happening through the seers, and it's not going well. We need to help them as soon as possible, or we're going to lose. I don't feel like fighting a monster capable of fighting All Might, without All Might," Fu added. "But how did we fight that thing, even with All Might?" Jiro asked. "Just the wind they make from fighting keeps us from getting close." "That may be the case for now, but I know someone who'll one day be able to keep up with, if not surpass All Might," Izuku said, before looking at Okako. "And thanks to Gami, we won't have to wait as long to see it happen." Author's notes: And that's the Yakuza done with. In case you're wondering, Mu and Core left with the other kids to guard them just in case something happened. So yeah, Eri fixed everyone up, thanks to Sheena killing her inexperience with her quirk, and she killed Izuku's quirklessness, finally giving him a quirk, a broken bar for 9 minutes. Izuku Midoriya, quirk, Repel X. This allows the user to either repel his body away from things or repel things away from him. Note, thanks to Sheena killing Izuku's limits, weaknesses, and inexperience, this quirk is far stronger and more useful than it normally would be if Izuku had it naturally. Anyway, the ending of this arc is finally coming up. Will it be next chapter? Maybe. Chapter 129, Under Attack Part 6. Kai wanted to lay down, he wanted to just collapse, and stop fighting. Hood was beating him badly. Kai had never been in so much pain before, and his body was begging him to just give up. But Kai stood his ground, on shaky legs, because if this thing beat him, then it would go after everyone else, and he couldn't let that happen. Once again, Kai's head rushed forward and tried to bite at Hood, but Hood once again easily dodged his attack. Weak, Hood said, as he got ready to attack Kai once more. Shoom, and then suddenly, Okako zipped in behind Hood, coming out of seemingly nowhere, with pink lightning cascading off her body, and her hair raised up from all the energy. Jupiter Smash, Crackoom, with the power of 100% full cowling, Okako punched Hood, and Hood went flying towards the ground like a lightning bolt. Boom. Hood hit the ground so hard it created a small earthquake. The impact caused the earth to distort like a wave, rising up and moving out of the way. The Namu was left in the middle of a massive crater, most of its body either annihilated or utterly crippled, and while it was regenerating, Nara came in, as XLR8, and stuck a piece of AKA inside him. What? Hood said as AKA started taking over its mind. Soon its eyes turned blue, and it finished regenerating. It came under AKA's full control. Ha. Yes, AKA/Hood cackled. So much power. AKA, is that you? Kai asked, looking down at the mind-controlled Namu. That's right, don't worry, I'll make them suffer for you. Just rest now. Ha. AKA/Hood cackled evilly. Thanks, Kai said tiredly, before he collapsed onto the ground, creating another small earthquake, as he let himself fall into unconsciousness. Nara rushed in with Eri under her arm, setting her down next to Kai. Eri immediately touched Kai's neck and activated her quirk. Kai's body was enveloped in a green glow, and within a second, all of Kai's wounds were healed. You really are just the most overpowered thing on Earth in a tiny package, huh? Nara said, looking at Kai's fully healed body. Eri blushed once again. Let's keep going, we need to heal everyone. Sai really wished she'd gone all out at the beginning. Currently, she was struggling to stand, with Konashi staring her down. Kurogiri was off to the side, and with him there, her options both in offense and defense were drastically reduced. TCH, really wish I could have done this without the unwanted third party, but Konashi grabbed her sword with both hands, and held it up towards the sky, before pouring a massive amount of energy into it, causing the energy to erupt into the sky like a beacon. This is where it ends, Father. Kurogiri looked closely, ready to create a portal if Sai tried anything. Too bad all the looking around in the world wouldn't have prepared him for what was next. Ook! Kurogiri suddenly cried out in pain, as something hit him in the stomach, causing him to stumble back. Huh? Konashi and Sai looked over at Kurogiri, wondering what just happened. Waga! Kurogiri cried as he was attacked multiple times by that same invisible force, Agakure. Sai's eyes widened, as she realized what was going on. She had an opening. With Kurogiri distracted, Sai opened up a bunch of portals, high above Konashi, as many as she could, before shooting explosive swords out of them, down at Konashi. Hell's rain. Konashi's eyes widened, and by the time she looked up, the swords were already on her. Kaboom! Konashi was swallowed in an absolutely massive explosion that shook the earth and scorched the ground, and everyone around had to look away so as not to be blinded, and when it died down, Konashi was on the ground, unconscious and badly burned. Sai collapsed onto one knee, utterly exhausted. Thank you, Agakure, you're welcome, Taru shouted back, seemingly giving away her position in front of Kurogiri. "Foolish girl, you have." Kurogiri was about to open a portal underneath the girl when he heard Shigaraki speak to him. "Why haven't you finished her off yet?" asked Shigaraki's voice impatiently behind him. "I am trying." Kurogiri didn't get to finish his sentence, as suddenly he lost all control over his body, because the person speaking behind him wasn't Shigaraki, it was Shinso, using his voice modifier. "Finally, I got this pain in the ass off the board," Shinso said. "Now, it's time we wrapped things up." Hit stared at his weakened opponent. Sori was down on one knee and panting with exhaustion, her body covered in wounds. "This fight is over," Hit said, before disappearing, and showing up behind Sori, ready to strike her in the back of the head. And then he felt his legs being swept from under him. "What?" Hit's eyes widened, as he fell to the floor, and activated his quirk, stopping time before Sori could get in a counterattack. He rolled off the floor and jumped back onto his feet, a good distance away from Sori, before deactivating his quirk, and then immediately getting a kick to the stomach. "Gah!" Hit cried, as Sori's foot impacted him so hard, blood came flying out of his mouth, and he skidded back a few feet. Hit clutched his stomach, and looked up at Sori, who was smirking confidently at him. "How? Yeah, it took me a while to figure out your quirk." Sori chuckled. "Here's my guess, your quirk stops time, but it's pretty exhausting to use, which is why you only use it for a few seconds and keep taking breaks in between your assaults. You also can't actually hit anything while time is stopped, which is why you only start the attack during stop time but finish it in regular time. So, what do you think?" "She figured out my quirk so easily." Hit thought, staring down Sori with a calm and collected look, although he was starting to get a bit nervous. Just a little bit. Hit then looked around, taking a good look at how the tide of battle was flowing. He didn't like the idea of abandoning his employers, even if he didn't like them. After all, a hitman with a reputation for flaking was a hitman that didn't get hired, but his reputation to take this, and he wasn't particularly fond of this assignment anyway. Then he looked back at Sori and exited his combat stance. "Alright, I can see where this is going, and as much as I hate to flake out on a customer, I'm not one to stay with a sinking ship either." "Oh, don't tell me you're gonna run away." Sori smirked. "Things were just getting good." "Afraid so," Hit said, before smirking a bit. "I'll admit though, it's been a while since I've had a good fight. Maybe we'll meet again sometime." And with that, he vanished. Sori stayed alert, trying to make sure he didn't try a sneak attack, but after a minute, she concluded that he really did leave. HMPH, can't wait for round 2. Sori muttered under her breath, before moving on to take out more villains. Aizawa grunted, as he too was standing on shaky legs. His body was covered in bruises, and his eyes hurt so much, he couldn't even use his quirk, which meant Weaver was free to use hers. "Well, this was pretty dull, mister," Weaver said, as her hands restitched themselves into swords, and she approached Aizawa. "So I'm just gonna end this now, so I can play with the OP whatever, K? Out of all the people that could end up killing me, it's a little girl in a pink dress. Aizawa thought. Yeah, that sounds like how my life would go." Weaver got close, and raised her sword up, ready to go for the kill. Vroom. When suddenly Ida came running by, with Gami in his arm, and he slashed into Weaver's back, creating a small gash. Weaver didn't even get the chance to finish her sentence before the light vanished from her eyes, and she fell to the ground, dead. Ida came running back towards Aizawa and slowed to a stop in front of his teacher. "You came back," Aizawa grunted, trying not to collapse in front of his student. "Why?" "Because you were losing," Gami said bluntly. "I apologize, sensei, but he's right. As heroes in training, we simply wouldn't allow you all to die," Ida reasoned. "And also, if you all were to lose, then our chances of survival would lower significantly." Aizawa couldn't argue against that, but he didn't want to praise them for going against his orders either. "Iri will be here momentarily to heal your wounds. Just hold on just a bit longer, sensei," Ida told him before he started to rev his engines. "And stop acting tough," Gami advised before he and Ida sped away towards his next objective. "Ugh." Aizawa collapsed onto one of his knees. "Smart-ass kid." Boom, 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 Nemesis was just blasting hordes of oncoming Grim, blowing them up in dozens as they poured in from the forest, and then, in a flash, he was completely engulfed in ice. Crack, 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 smash. Although it didn't stay confined for long, very quickly Nemesis used his overwhelming strength to break its top half free of the ice, although its legs were still frozen over. However, this gave time for Ken in his Heat Blast form, Todoroki, and Netsu, to all gather in a triangle formation around Nemesis. Kaboom! All three of them unleashed their most powerful fire attacks, right at Nemesis, engulfing the monster completely, in fire so hot it'd make Endeavor feel insecure. After a few minutes of unleashing hell, the three of them stopped and looked at the massive inferno they had created. Hey you're sure these things aren't alive, right? Ken asked, sounding a little nervous. Yeah, Yonda and aka said that these things don't really have minds, except for that purple one and the hooded one, Netsu confirmed. Oh, sweet. Ken breathed a sigh of relief. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr In a contest of strength, All Might was stronger, for sure, but he'd taken quite a lot of damage, and used up a lot of his power, while Ruin was good as new thanks to his shock absorption and regeneration. Bam! All Might grunted as he felt something hit his back. He looked behind him, and saw Janma, cackling evilly, before he started rapidly hitting All Might in the back from a distance, extending his arms to hit the symbol of peace from a few yards away. Bam! 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 Hit after hit assailed All Might's back, and while Janma's punches didn't hurt all that much, they stung more than anything. They were really distracting, and they were allowing Ruin to start winning the contest of strength. All Might clenched his teeth hard, as Ruin started pushing him back. Hit! Janma cackled, as he gleefully kept up his assault, and then Kiba flew in and kicked him in the side of the head. Janma let out a high-pitched cry, as he was flung to the side, away from All Might's battle. "Why, young Kiba?" All Might cried out in surprise. "HMPH, looks like you can't super armor your way through this problem, All Might," Kiba remarked, "but have no fear, we have come to assist you." "We?" All Might asked, and then, 100% Uraraka came barreling through, and grabbed Ruin, taking away its gravity, and then throwing it aside. "Young Uraraka?" All Might gasped, shocked to see Okuko exhibit such speed and power out of the blue. "No time to explain, I can use 100% of One for All for like 7 more minutes." Okuko quickly filled All Might in. "We need to create a cut in this thing, even a small one will do." "A small cut may not work, this monster seems to have regeneration properties," All Might told her. "It'll heal before you know it." Ruin came running back at both of them, but All Might and Okuko were ready. Smash! Both of them rushed at the Namu and punched it in the chest at the same time. Its shock absorption couldn't handle that amount of force, and blood spilled from its beak-like mouth before it went flying back, flailing across the ground. "If all else fails, then just hit it harder," All Might laughed. Okuko sighed. "You would say that." Meanwhile, Janma got back on his feet, looking absolutely pissed. "Grrrr. Hey, there, huh?" Janma looked behind them, to see Hood flying a few feet above him. "Why don't you play with us?" Hood, aka cackled. "Stomp, stomp, stomp." Janma looked back to his other side, to see Rhino, aka staring him down. Kiba landed onto Rhino's head and looked down at Janma with a confident smirk. "Prepare to feel the consequences for invading a queen's castle." "No, no, 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 no." Shigaraki started rapidly scratching his neck, as he saw his plan fall apart in front of him, as his minions either fled, fell, or were taken under enemy control. "So, you're the one behind all this?" Shigaraki froze, before looking behind him, to see Izuku glaring daggers at him. "Izuku Midoriya, and who exactly are you?" Izuku asked, his glare hardening. "My name is Tamura Shigaraki, leader of the League of Villains." Shigaraki introduced himself. "And I was just looking for someone to kill." "Well, you're about as unpleasant as I thought," Izuku said, meaning, "I have no need to hold back." Shoom! Suddenly, Izuku dashed in front of Shigaraki, around and behind him, faster than Shigaraki could react. before striking him in the back, and then repelling him off of his fist. AGCK, Shigaraki cried out in pain and surprise, as he was sent flying, smacking against the gates. What the Izuku then dashed forward, grabbed Shigaraki's shirt, and yanked the villain in front of him. Eagle uppercut, then Izuku uppercut Shigaraki, and then repelled Shigaraki's chin away from his fist, causing Shigaraki to fly up into the air. Izuku then repelled himself off the ground, repelling himself off the air under him as he rose, making him fly like a rocket, above Shigaraki. Thunderstrike, Izuku cried as he raised his foot above Shigaraki. Axe kick, boom. Izuku axe kicked Shigaraki, while Max repelled Shigaraki, causing the villain to crash down to the ground like a bolt of lightning, making a small crater as he landed. Shigaraki spat out blood, as the wind was knocked from his body, and he felt his bones break from the impact, and it only got worse, as Izuku repelled himself down at max speed, and knee Shigaraki in the gut so hard buried him even deeper into the ground. The last thing Shigaraki saw before he passed out was Izuku's emerald green eyes staring down at him. Okako and All Might were absolutely demolishing Ruin, the two of them rushing him, and hitting him with synchronized attacks, overwhelming its shock absorption, and its regeneration, as they beat the artificial monster all around the yard. Slam! Ruin crashed down into the dirt, creating a massive crater, and kicking up huge clouds of dirt. Rag! Ruin groaned weakly, as its regeneration tried to keep up, and heal its wounds. As Ruin got onto its legs, suddenly, half its body was frozen over by Todoroki. Uraraka! Now, Todoroki shouted at his classmate. Right, All Might, break it open, Okako told her teacher. All right. All Might charged forward, and smashed through the iced over part of the Namu, destroying half of its body. Okako then rushed forward, taking a piece of AKA out of her pocket, and shoving it in its regenerating bloodstream. As Ruin's body finished regenerating, its eyes turned blue, and it stopped moving. AKA, Okako hesitantly walked up to the beast. Are you in control, Ruin? AKA nodded, still unable to speak with this body. Phew. Okako wiped her forehead, before turning to Todoroki, and giving him a thumbs up. Young Uraraka, I'm afraid I'm a bit confused. All Might walked up to Okako with a confused expression. Oh right, you don't know about AKA, Okako said. Well, just know that we have this thing under control now. I'll explain after we go. Everyone looked over to the side, to see Janbo laid out on the ground, covered in wounds, and in front of him were Hood, Rhino, Kiba, and Aizawa now fully healed and using his quirk to keep Janba from breaking itself up, stretching, or regenerating. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr rushed over behind it and grabbed it by its arms. Gah, rag, ag. Janeba struggled to try and escape Ruin's grip, but it was a fruitless effort. Kiba grinned, as she took a piece of AKA out of her pocket and walked up to Janeba. The vampiric girl shoved the piece into one of the cuts on Janeba's body. Ag. Janeba cried out, as he felt AKA crawl up its body, and into its brain. Soon enough, its eyes turned blue, and its face broke out into a twisted smile once more. Ah ha 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 ha, now all those who would stand in our way have been defeated. Ah ha ha. Janeba, AKA laughed evilly. Are we sure that's a good thing? All Might asked as he looked at the evilly cackling Namu. Yep, Okako sighed, as she powered down. That's just how she is, if you say so. All Might shrugged. Yoo-woo-ee-oo. That's when they heard the sound of police cars and helicopters roll in. This is the police. All villains stand down immediately, announced one of the helicopters. You are under arrest. Amazing how they show up after we finished off all the villains, Shoto noted. Get used to that, young Todoroki, All Might chuckled. Get used to that. Alright, and that ends the USJ arc. The next chapter will be the epilogue for this arc. Speaking of which, what did you guys think of this arc? Chapter 130, Aftermath. It had been 8 hours after the event, and the kids, as well as both Sori and Sai, were all standing in front of Izuku, who was sitting on the steps of the facility, with Shina standing behind him. Alright, I'm going to explain everything in the simplest way possible, Izuku announced as everyone looked at him attentively. Earlier today, we were attacked by two villain organizations. One is the League of Villains, and the other is the Meta Liberation Army. The League of Villains, what a stupid name. Ayanda rolled her eyes at the childishness of that name. The League of Villains is a seemingly recently founded villain organization. Not much is known about them, other than they had the ability to create artificial creatures, that we've figured out are called Namu, Izuku explained. Which are those creatures aka took control over earlier? So are they like Yami's Grim? Nara asked curiously. Izuku shook his head. Yami's Grim are quirk-made beings, born from nothing but energy, with no minds or will of their own. The Namu on the other hand, seem to have been people, heavily altered by some sort of experiments, some of which retain some level of their sense of self, but others appear to be mindless monsters. Looks of disgust spread among the crowd, and he returned visibly pale, as the thought of human experiments hit a bit too close to home. Again, we still don't know much about them, Izuku continued. The Namu aka captured have been taken by the government for study. I doubt we'll need to worry about them again. A broken bar. However, the leader of the league, Tamura Shigaraki, as well as assistant Kurogiri, were both mysteriously transported away while they were being escorted to prison. What? Shouted pretty much everyone, Shina, Sori, and Sai included, all staring at him with fear and shock in their eyes. As concerning as this is, I don't think we'll have to worry too much about them, Izuku reassured them, keeping his calm and collected tone. From what we can tell from the interrogations, the League themselves didn't seem to care too much about us. Rather, they were here for All Might. They knew All Might would be here, so he ended up being caught up in their attack. Although there is still the risk of them seeking revenge for what happened, considering All Might is still alive, it's more likely they'll focus their efforts on him. What's more concerning, however, is the Meta Liberation Army. The Meta Liberation Army, to think such a abhorrent group could still exist. Sai spat out with disgust. What's a Meta Liberation Army? Sori asked curiously. I'll re-explain it for those who don't know. Izuku cleared his throat. The Meta Liberation Army is a group that came into existence after quirks started to become more widespread and normalized, as well as more regulated. Some people viewed these regulations as against human rights, and one man, known as Destro, radicalized the people into fighting against the government, to try and create a more quirk-centric system. Thus the Meta Liberation Army was born. Given that the Meta Liberation Army put great value on quirks, they quickly began to view them as the most important thing to a person, deciding that a quirk should decide how much value a person has. Those with stronger quirks should be in a higher class than those with weaker ones, and those with no quirks should be below them. It gets more complicated, as some people are more radical in believing that those with villainous quirks, weaker quirks, or the quirkless should be outright killed. Yami could see the anger rising in many of his siblings, as Izuku continued explaining this horrible group, but in particular, he kept his eyes on Kiba. She was livid right now and tightening her fist to the point where Yami was worried she'd draw blood, but she showed no sign of transforming, much to his relief. This group was believed to have been disbanded many years ago, but it seems like they've returned. Izuku continued, there's still a lot we don't know. None of the people we've identified as MLA members have been willing to talk. However, thanks to Shina, we do know a few things. Shina gave a nervous, awkward smile, and a small wave. Most of the children didn't wave back, except for Fu, Yami, and Netsukai wanted to wave back but he had no arms, with the rest of them giving her a hesitant look, causing Shina's already fragile smile to fade. I know that you may not have gotten off on the right foot. However, Shina wasn't herself at that moment, and she had valid reasons for doing what she did, Izuku said sternly, trying to wane away a bit of the tension between her and the others, and at the end of the day, she was a huge help in turning the tide of the battle. But regardless of all that, she's now part of the family, and I expect you all to treat her well, okay? Netsu and Kai gave an enthusiastic response while everyone seemed to be less so. Alright, back to what I was saying, Izuku sighed. Shina provided us with some valuable intel. Apparently, this new MLA have been in action for a very long time, generations even. They've amassed a lot of power and influence, with many of their members being either very wealthy business owners or even politicians. They've inducted many children into their group from birth, attempting to brainwash them into believing in their cause. And some of the children with the more promising quirks are brought into special programs, with a select few being turned into child assassins, another of which we've met. Nice. The one Fu encountered, Sai felt like she was gonna be sick. She dispersed the HPSC, but at least they had the decency to wait until their specially picked out child soldiers were in their late teens before they started asking them to fight. It was disgusting. Using Sheena's information, as well as my contacts with the police and the heroes, we're currently working on arresting a few dozen members of the MLA, some of which are those aforementioned wealthy, or high-ranking ones, Izuku explained before giving a sigh. However, it's unlikely we'll catch many of them. News of this attack and its failure has already been spread, and with Tamura Shigaraki free, assuming his group is still communicating with the MLA, he's definitely going to tell them about Sheena's betrayal, which will likely lead to many of the suspects fleeing before we can arrest them, and even then, that's likely not even a fraction of their forces. A feeling of unease spread throughout the children and the adults. To be honest, Sheena in particular looked extremely unnerved. She'd hoped to have been of more use, but even after killing her forgetfulness, she could only really give them so much, which was actually so little. She knew there was so much more to the MLA, that her handlers didn't tell her, or show her, saying that she'd learn about it one day. Now she wished she dug a bit deeper, and learned more while she was there. But, the important part is, now the heroes are fully aware of the MLA's continued existence and will be looking into this matter extensively, Izuku said, to try and pick up the mood. As you can guess, the government is taking the existence of a powerful terrorist group hellbent on overthrowing them very seriously, and doing everything in their power to try and root them out. Now, as for what we'll be doing, Izuku sighed and looked back up at the house. Obviously we can't stay in the building for the time being. It's going to be under construction for at least a month, and we can't really stay at a hotel because of that broken bar. Well, Kai. Everyone looked back at Kai, who was looking down in shame. Sorry, it's fine Kai. It's not like you can help it, Izuku reassured them. But due to this, we'll be camping out in the woods for a while. This received the broken bar various reactions. Some like Netsu, Kyaku, and seemed enthusiastic about the idea. Others like Iri, Kiba, and Fu didn't seem to care all that much, while some others such as Ken, Shraku, and Nara, seemed a bit upset at the notion of being out in the woods with no Wi-Fi, all except for Yami, Izuku said, looking right at the pale boy, who looked back curiously. I'm currently making arrangements for Yami to stay in the city, and before anyone complains, the reason for this is because we lost a lot of Grim. Yami needs to gain a lot of negative energy, in order not just to replenish the amount of Grim we lost, but to increase them, because after today, I fully plan on drastically increasing the security, both using Grim and other elements I'm currently working on. While it's true that at the end of the day, all of you walked away without a scratch, that's only because of Iri and Sheena. Had it not been for them, things could have ended much worse. Izuku looked down, his fist clenched as everyone around could feel the guilt and anger radiating off of him. As you all know, I hate the idea of having to send you all to fight off villains. I understand you're strong, I understand that many of you aim to become heroes one day, but right now you are children. You shouldn't have to worry about fighting for your life, and if the MLA is going to go after us, then I have to do everything in my power to make sure you all aren't harmed. I assure you, things will be different from here on out. After sending the children away with Sori to find a camping spot, Izuku stayed along with Sai, to have a private conversation. Those things had multiple quirks. Sai cut to the chase, looking up at Izuku as he still sat on the stairs. Izuku nodded solemnly. It's quite possible that he is involved. We're not 100% sure but to broken bar tch. Damn that man. Damn every inch of his foul body. Sai cursed, her clenched fist trembling in anger. Never in my life have I hated someone I've never met so much. I feel the same, Izuku agreed, before sighing, but that's not why I wanted to talk to you about. What I wanted to talk to you about was that girl you fought. You mean the one that claimed to be my daughter? Sai groaned while rubbing the bridge of her nose. Honestly, I have no idea who she is, likely a child of one of my sisters, or even my brother. I have no idea how she could have gotten such a ridiculous idea in her head. Well, a broken bar about that. Izuku looked away. You see, they were Yuma broken bar. They couldn't identify her in any way, so they did some DNA tests. A broken bar and a broken bar. Izuku didn't finish his sentence. Instead of pulling a piece of paper out of his pocket and holding it out to her, Sai took it hesitantly, wondering what exactly was on that paper to get this kind of reaction. Then she looked at it, and her eyes went wide. There was a long pause, as Izuku just looked away from Sai, and Sai looked down at the paper in disbelief. "There's a broken bar. This can't be right," Sai muttered in shock, her eyes as wide as dinner plates. I've never been pregnant before. I would know if I gave birth, and I know for a fact I couldn't have fathered the girl. I asked them to check it multiple times," Izuku assured her, "but each time the results came out the same." "But that's impossible," Sai continued to protest, looking at Izuku almost desperately. "I've never even gone so far as to have sex before, let alone bring a child into the world." "Well, the world is full of strange quirks that can make strange things happen," Izuku told her. "Regardless, she is your biological daughter." Sai was speechless. She fell into an overwhelmed silence in response to the news, and so she just stood there with her mouth open for a while. After a few minutes of silence, Sai managed to compose herself, and she walked up the stairs, before taking a seat next to Izuku and rubbing her head. "Who is the other parent?" Sai asked, trying her best to sort out her thoughts and feelings. "We don't know," Izuku explained. "The second DNA signature is unknown, likely whoever they are. They're not on the grid." "Great," Sai groaned. I should also let you know that Yuma broken bar somehow, and I don't know how, your mother found out about this." Izuku winced as he said it. Sai's eyes widened once more. "What?" "Yeah, while I was speaking to the police on this matter, your mother showed up, and Yuma broken bar asked that we discuss this matter." Izuku once again winced as he recalled how things went out. Meeting Sai's mother was a broken bar experience. She looked exactly like Sai, but bigger, in every sense of the word, and while Sai was stoic, this woman had an unrelentingly cold glare on at all times. It felt like she was trying to freeze Izuku with her eyes. "I am a broken bar, so sorry." Sai shivered, as she imagined how terrified Izuku must have been. "But, what exactly did she want?" "Well, she wanted to see if I could help reduce the girl's sentence to house arrest," Izuku explained. "Specifically, she wanted to get the girl into her custody." "What?" Sai screamed in shock, jumping up to their feet. "And I agreed," Izuku continued, wanting to just get through all this already. But why?" Sai shouted out, with a completely flabbergasted expression. "She attacked you, why would you agree to something like that?" "Well, I'll be honest, your mother paid me a lot of money," Izuku admitted, blushing a bit from embarrassment. "Money I am going to need in order to put all my plans into effect, and to be fair, from what I was told, the girl didn't even know she was attacking my facility. She just heard she'd get the opportunity to kill you, and went for it. She didn't even know there were kids around." Sai took a deep breath, and went silent again, as she took some time to try and get her thoughts together. "Are you going to need some time off to deal with this?" Izuku asked with a voice full of trepidation. In truth, he really needed her help right now, but, considering her situation, Izuku couldn't refuse if she asked for some time off. Sai shook her head. "I can't, as kind as the offer is. I just started working here, and right now you're in a terrible situation. It wouldn't feel right to just leave. I'll make time for a broken bar all this. Thank you." Izuku bowed his head in appreciation. "I appreciate it, very much, but with that said, I'm going to need you to stay with Yami in the city. Sori will stay here and guard the rest of us." Sai nodded. "Understood. By the way, where are you sending Yami?" "He's going to be living with Amaya and her family for the time being," Izuku explained. "I already called them and discussed it. and they agreed rather easily. Apparently, her father's grandmother was quirkless, and so their family is viewing taking Yami as a stand against quirk discrimination, which just about echoes the public's feelings about this. Oh, Sai raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? Well, almost immediately after the attack, I talking with DOC, once we confirmed the MLA's part in this, we agreed to spin this as an act of quirk discrimination, which it is. But we're basically making this out to be a statement rather than a petty grudge, Izuku explained, and so supporting me is considered to be a statement against quirk discrimination, so broken bar you're taking advantage of the situation, Sai summed up. Izuku sighed, once again feeling a bit embarrassed. Yes, but I kind of have to. As I said, I have plans for increasing security, and none of them are going to be cheap. Already donations have increased by 75%, and I'm not the only one benefiting. Other anti-quirk discrimination groups are also likely to see a rise in donations, and hopefully, this might spark enough fire in the people to get some more progress going on this front. I do hope so. I don't understand why people must always find something to discriminate. Sai shook her head in disgust. Skin color, status, sexuality. There's always something. From experience, it's about 3 things, Izuku responded. First, is superiority. Some people like the idea that they are just better than others, even if it's over something small. The second is justification. People get angry, and they want to take it out on someone else, and they use discrimination as justification to hurt someone, simply to make themselves feel better. And third is handed-down teachings. Some people are taught since birth that some people are below them, and those people grow up thinking that that's the truth. All that is the reason Kaken turned out the way he did. Sometimes I hate this species. Sai sighed. Brrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr I can understand why. He then answered the phone and brought it up to his ear. Hey, so, we got all the camping stuff you asked for, as well as the special equipment, Nami told him. Now, as for the new child, you'll be taken care of. Wait, hold on a second, Izuku shouted, his eyes widening as he jumped to his feet. You want me to accept a new kid, now of all times? Yeah, it may seem like a bad time, but this only a broken bar. This one is a special case, Nami explained, and they might come with something you can use. What the hell happened? All for one side, rubbing his head to try and provide some relief for the horrible headache he was experiencing. First, his attack failed, utterly and completely failed. All Might was still alive, no one died. They lost many troops, as well as their powerful Namu. They didn't get a single one of the children, and he had to step in to save Shigaraki and Kurogiri. Overall, it was a mess, and now, he had to deal with a very pissed-off Redistro over fast time. The leader of the MLA was currently glaring daggers at him. He was seething with anger, and he could even see black spots from his quirk covering his face. Our attack failed, All for One answered. Simple as that. Simple? We lost good men in that attack, and the government is now aware of our existence, Redistro shouted in a rage. You're surprised? You should have known that would happen if we all lost, All for One said casually. Surely you were ready to accept that consequence when you offered your assistance in my plans. You told me that you have powerful forces on your side, that you had something capable of going off killing even All Might, Redistro yelled, that they had little to no chance of winning. Yes, and everything I told you was correct, All for One nodded. However, little to no chance doesn't mean they have no chance. Even if something only has a 1% chance of happening, that still means it can happen. Not to mention, I told you that, not knowing that one of your own against would betray us, and single-handedly turn the tide of battle in their favor, that made Redistro freeze, his eyes widening with shock. What? That's right, Shigaraki informed me that he saw what was her name, Shinigami? He saw her fighting what? That's right, Shigaraki informed me that he saw what was her name, Shinigami? He saw her fighting alongside Midoriya's forces, All for One explained. He also saw Okako Yoraraka using 100% of her power, something which is normally impossible for her. That eerie girl freely using her quirk to completely revitalize her allies, something also normally impossible, and he was defeated by Izuku Midoriya, who was wielding a powerful quirk, again, something normal impossible. All of this was thanks to your child assassin. Iridistro kept looking at the camera in shock for a minute before suddenly an enraged expression came to him, and his face became covered in black. Suddenly the camera went out, as Iridistro presumably started smashing things in his office out of rage, off for one side at the static-covered screen. To think that man is leading the MLAI, give them at most 2 years before they collapse. Things were going to get much more lively very soon. But for now, he had to lie low. The heroes would be on high alert, and he couldn't be too aggressive. At least not right now, especially while Shigaraki was still healing. For now, he'd sit tight. But, soon enough, he would have All Might's head. Author's note: alright, so this is the official end to the League of Villains attack arc. And I want to address some things. Firstly, some of you were saying that they might use Sheena to finish off the MLA. Sheena is a child. Why would she have information like that? Even if she's an assassin for them, she still wouldn't have that much information. As best she can get a few people arrested, put on a wanted list. The MLA are the main villains of this fic, and they're not going anywhere. Second, Aoyama. Aoyama did not know anything about the attack, and only gave information pertaining to how long they were staying at the Midoriya Foundation. Izuku's not gonna blame this on him, that would be dramatically out of character. Third, yeah, there was no way the government was letting AKA keep those Namu. I know in the future fic, AKA still had them, and yes, my original intention was to BS my way into letting her keep them, then I realized that made her way too OP. Alright, I think that's it for now. Please review and have a nice